Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the opulent, gas-lit parlors of the 19th century, a time when shadows danced with secrets, and the line between the living and the dead felt delightfully thin. Imagine yourself there, a chill in the air, the scent of polished wood and dust motes catching in the dim light from a flickering gas lamp. You're not just observing, you're there, a silent guest at a Victorian séance, perhaps even a participant, though frankly, you probably won't survive the night with your sanity fully intact if you truly engage. The air is thick with anticipation, the rustle of silk, the whisper of unseen presences. The ornate furniture around you isn't just decoration. It's a character in this unfolding drama, a silent witness to a world obsessed with what lies beyond. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in a room that hums with a quiet energy, a silent testament to the era's fascination with the supernatural. The heavy velvet curtains are drawn, sealing out the mundane world, and the only illumination comes from a single, ornate gas chandelier, its flames casting long, dancing shadows that seem to stretch and contract with a life of their own. You run a hand over the smooth, cool surface of a mahogany table, its dark wood gleaming under the faint light. This isn't just any table, it's a séance table, a focal point for contact with the ethereal. Its sturdy, carved legs speak of permanence, of something designed to endure, even in the face of unseen forces. The very air around it feels charged, as if lingering whispers from past communications still cling to its polished surface. You glance around the room, your eyes taking in the rich tapestry of the Victorian aesthetic. Every piece of furniture, from the towering, intricately carved display cabinets to the plush, button-tufted armchairs, seems to possess a story, a history etched into its very fibers. This wasn't an era of minimalism. Oh no, the Victorians embraced the maximalist, filling their homes with objects that spoke of wealth, status, and curiously enough, a deep-seated connection to the spiritual realm. Consider for a moment the very nature of these furnishings. They are often dark, heavy, and imposing. Think of the Gothic Revival style, with its deliberate echoes of medieval cathedrals and ancient castles. These weren't just stylistic choices. They were imbued with a certain gravitas, a sense of timelessness that lent itself perfectly to the serious business of communing with spirits. You notice a large, darkly stained wardrobe in the corner, its doors slightly ajar. Is it just your imagination, or does a faint, cool breeze seem to emanate from within, even though the windows are tightly shut? Perhaps it's merely the old wood settling, or perhaps it's something more. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of dark, heavy furniture in Victorian homes was purely a matter of fashion, or if it was, in some subtle way, influenced by the burgeoning interest in spiritualism. Did the somber aesthetics of the furniture intentionally create an atmosphere conducive to supernatural experiences? Or was it merely a happy coincidence? You sit down, sinking into the deep cushions of a brocade armchair. The fabric, though old, still retains a hint of its former richness, and the springs creak softly beneath your weight. This chair, like so many others of its time, feels like it could absorb secrets, holding them within its stuffing and framework. It's almost as if the furniture itself is listening, bearing witness to the hushed conversations, the nervous laughter, and the sudden, heart-stopping knocks that would often punctuate a séance. One mainstream historical fact about this period is the sheer volume of furniture produced. The Industrial Revolution, with its new manufacturing techniques, made furniture more accessible to the burgeoning middle class. No longer were elaborate pieces exclusively for the aristocracy. This democratization of furniture meant more homes were filled with these substantial pieces, providing more potential anchors for spiritual activity, at least in the minds of the ghost hunters. It's a funny thought, isn't it? Imagine a spectral entity having just traversed the veil thinking, "Oh good, a solid mahogany table to knock on. Far better than floating aimlessly." The intricate carvings on the table before you catch your eye again. They depict swirling vines and grotesque faces, a common motif in Victorian design, often drawn from classical mythology or Gothic architecture. These weren't just decorative flourishes. They were often seen as protective symbols, warding off evil spirits or, conversely, inviting benevolent ones. Or perhaps, for some, they simply added to the overall theatricality of the seance. After all, a good show was always appreciated, even when dealing with the afterlife. You find yourself wondering about the carpenters who crafted these pieces. Did they too believe in the spirits that their creations were meant to house or facilitate communication with? Or were they simply skilled artisans, oblivious to the spectral drama that would unfold around their handiwork? It's a quirky thought, isn't it? A cabinet maker, meticulously carving a gargoyle, completely unaware that one day it might be used to channel the spirit of a long-lost aunt. The lighting, or lack thereof, plays a crucial role in enhancing the atmosphere. Gaslight, with its soft, wavering glow, created an environment ripe for optical illusions and misinterpretations. Shadows stretched and danced, making inanimate objects seem to move, and faces appear distorted. This was, of course, a boon for those who sought to prove the existence of spirits, as it provided ample opportunity for clever trickery, whether intentional or not. You might see a faint, shimmering outline near a tall grandfather clock, only for it to resolve into nothing more than a trick of the light reflecting off its polished brass pendulum. "Ah, the spirits are playing peekaboo again," you might exclaim, barely suppressing a giggle, even as a shiver runs down your spine. The furniture, solid and unmoving, served as a grounding presence in this often disorienting environment. It was something tangible to hold on to, literally and figuratively, when the boundaries of reality seemed to blur. And speaking of grounding, the sheer weight of these pieces of furniture was, in itself, a kind of anchor. Imagine a flimsy, lightweight chair trying to withstand the energetic movements of a levitating table during a particularly enthusiastic seance. It just wouldn't do. Victorian furniture, with its robust construction and often heavy materials like oak, mahogany, and walnut, provided the necessary stability. This wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about functionality in the context of spiritualist practices. A table that could withstand being wrapped, tilted, or even, allegedly, levitated was a prized possession for any serious ghost hunter. It also spoke to the Victorians' belief in permanence and solidity in a rapidly changing world. Everything was in flux: industrialization, scientific discoveries, social upheaval. But your furniture, at least, was a constant. At least the spirits won't tip over Aunt Mildred's credenza, you muse, a small smile playing on your lips. You notice a small, elegant writing desk, its surface covered with an array of curious objects, a planchette, a stack of blank paper, and several quills. This was where automatic writing might take place, the medium's hand guided by an unseen force, scribbling messages from the great beyond. The desk itself, with its many drawers and compartments, seemed to invite secrets, a silent confessor to the spiritual communications that unfolded upon its surface. The very act of writing, a physical manifestation of thought, lent itself well to the belief that spirits could, in a similar fashion, manipulate physical objects to convey their messages. It was all part of the grand illusion, or perhaps the grand revelation, depending on your perspective. The very concept of a haunted house in the 19th century was often intrinsically linked to the furniture within it. A rocking chair that rocked on its own, a piano that played ethereal melodies, or a cabinet that opened and closed without human intervention. These were the classic signs of a spectral presence. The furniture wasn't just a backdrop. It was an active participant in the haunting. This gave a tangible quality to the intangible, making the unseen forces seem more real and present. It made the ghost hunting, if you will, more furniture-centric. If only this armchair could talk, you think, giving its armrest a gentle pat, imagine the stories it could tell. One quirky or fringe tidbit is the belief held by some spiritualists that certain materials were more conducive to spiritual energy. Wood, being a natural material that was once alive, was often considered a good conductor. This certainly made sense given the abundance of wooden furniture. Metals, particularly iron, were sometimes thought to have protective or channeling properties. It's fascinating to consider how these beliefs, however fringe, might have subtly influenced the choices people made when furnishing their homes, especially if they harbored an interest in the supernatural. Perhaps that's why your host insisted on that solid oak cabinet. It wasn't just a display piece, it was a spiritual antenna. Finally, you consider the social aspect of these gatherings. Seances were often social events, a way for people to connect, to share their anxieties and hopes about the afterlife. The furniture provided the setting for these intimate, often intense, interactions. People would gather around tables, huddle together on sofas, and lean back in armchairs, all united by a shared curiosity and a longing for connection with those who had passed on. The comfort and familiarity of the furniture created a sense of ease, even as the participants braced themselves for the unknown. It was a strange blend of the mundane and the mysterious, all played out within the comforting confines of a well-furnished room. And who wouldn't want to encounter a ghost from the plush comfort of a velvet settee? It beats standing, that's for sure. You remain in the richly appointed Victorian parlor, the air still thick with unspoken anticipation. Your gaze drifts towards a series of framed portraits adorning the walls, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow you with an unsettling intensity. These aren't just family heirlooms. They are, in the context of a ghost hunting endeavor, potential vessels, visual anchors for the spirits of the departed. The very act of immortalizing a person's likeness in paint or photograph speaks to a desire to preserve their presence, a desire that aligns perfectly with the spiritualist yearning to reconnect with the deceased. You wonder if the eyes in the painting of the stern-faced gentleman seem to glint just a little when the gaslight flickers. Probably not. Or maybe. Who's to say? The ornate, gilded frames surrounding these portraits are themselves works of art, intricate and detailed, mirroring the elaborate designs found on the furniture. This consistency in aesthetic was no accident. The Victorians loved symmetry and a cohesive design scheme, and this extended to every element of their decor, creating a sense of unity and often a touch of grandeur. This grandiosity, in turn, served to elevate the seriousness of the spiritualist pursuits taking place within these rooms. It suggested that what was happening here was not a mere parlor trick, but a profound engagement with forces beyond mortal comprehension, a bit like setting up a complex scientific experiment in a lavish ballroom. It just feels more important, doesn't it? You notice a small, round table, often referred to as a tipping table or spirit table, positioned prominently in the center of the room. This particular piece of furniture was practically custom-made for ghost hunting. Its lightweight construction, often with a central pedestal, made it ideal for alleged levitations and wrappings. Unlike the heavier, more substantial pieces, these tables were designed for movement, for seemingly defying the laws of physics under the influence of unseen hands. You can almost hear the rhythmic creak and thump as the table would respond to questions, tilting once for yes and twice for no. A simple yet profoundly unsettling communication device. It was the original binary code, only with more dramatic flair. One mainstream historical fact about 19th century spiritualism is its widespread appeal across all social classes, from the working class seeking comfort after loss, to the educated elite grappling with scientific advancements and existential questions. Even Queen Victoria herself was known to dabble in spiritualism after the death of Prince Albert. This broad appeal meant that the furniture used in seances ranged from simple, homemade contraptions in humble homes to exquisitely crafted pieces in aristocratic mansions. The underlying principle, however, remained the same: furniture as a conduit. It's comforting to think that whether you were royalty or a commoner, a good, solid table was always there for your ghostly encounters. The choice of wood for these tables was often significant. Lighter woods like pine or even balsa, though less common for formal furniture, were sometimes favored for tipping tables due to their perceived responsiveness. However, for the more theatrical and impressive demonstrations, heavier woods like mahogany were used to make the levitation, or tipping, seem even more astonishing. Imagine a massive, solid oak table seemingly defying gravity. That's a trick that would truly impress. The denser the wood, the more powerful the alleged spiritual force would appear to be. It's like a ghostly strength contest, with the table as the ultimate test of power. You shift in your armchair, the faint scent of old wood and something vaguely floral, perhaps dried potpourri, reaching your nostrils. The armchair itself, with its high back and wide arms, provides a sense of enclosure, a private world within the larger room. This sense of personal space, even in a communal setting, was important for participants who might be feeling vulnerable or overwhelmed by the spiritual phenomena. It allowed them to retreat slightly, to observe without feeling completely exposed. It's the equivalent of having your own little emotional fort during a scary movie. The proliferation of fancy furniture also speaks to the Victorian obsessee. On with material possessions as a reflection of status and respectability. A home filled with ornate, well-crafted pieces was a sign of a prosperous and well-ordered life. Ironically, this very material obsession often coexisted with a deep yearning for the immaterial, the spiritual. It was a paradox, a society that reveled in the tangible while simultaneously reaching for the ethereal. We love our chaises long, but we also love our disembodied voices. You imagine a Victorian socialite declaring, utterly without irony, historians still argue whether the furniture itself was truly believed to be imbued with spiritual energy, or if it was merely seen as a convenient prop for mediums and spiritualists to demonstrate their powers. Some contemporary accounts suggest a genuine belief in the furniture as a kind of spiritual battery, absorbing and transmitting energy. Others dismiss this as a clever way to distract from sleight of hand or subtle manipulations. Was the table truly levitating due to ectoplasmic energy, or was it just a well-placed foot? The debate rages on, much like the debate over whether pineapple belongs on pizza. You notice a small, locked cabinet, its dark wood glinting in the dim light. These spirit cabinets were often used in more elaborate seances, serving as a dark, enclosed space from which a medium could purportedly channel spirits or even manifest full-body apparitions. The darkness and confinement were thought to concentrate spiritual energy, much like a photographic darkroom. The solid construction of these cabinets also added to their mystique, suggesting that something truly powerful and potentially dangerous was contained within. It was the ultimate do not disturb sign for the spectral realm. Please, no uninvited ghosts during tea time. You might imagine a sign tacked inside. The intricate details of the furniture, from the turning of the legs to the carving of decorative elements, also served a practical purpose. They provided nooks and crannies for hidden mechanisms or sleight-of-hand tricks. A loose panel here, a spring-loaded drawer there, all could be used to create the illusion of supernatural phenomena. This isn't to say that all spiritualist phenomena were fraudulent, but the design of the furniture certainly made it easier for those inclined to deceive. It was like furniture designed by a magician for magicians. Consider the atmosphere created by these grand furnishings. They evoked a sense of history, of permanence, and of a world that existed beyond the fleeting present. This sense of connection to the past was particularly appealing in a society grappling with rapid change. The old, familiar forms of furniture offered comfort and a sense of continuity, even as the world outside was hurtling towards modernity. It was a visual anchor in a time of great upheaval, much like a comfy blanket on a stormy night. At least the armoire won't suddenly invent electricity, you muse with a touch of irony. The sheer variety of furniture types available in the 19th century also reflects the diverse activities taking place in a Victorian home. Beyond the dining table and beds, you had music stands for the popular musical evenings, writing desks for correspondence, display cabinets for curios, and of course, specialized tables for card games or, naturally, ghostly encounters. Each piece had its purpose, contributing to the rich tapestry of Victorian domestic life, a life that increasingly included the occasional spectral visitor. It was a time when furniture was truly multi-purpose, from holding your teacup to housing a benevolent specter. You find your gaze drawn to a large, ornate clock on the mantelpiece, its steady ticking a rhythmic counterpoint to the quiet of the room. Time, in the context of spiritualism, often felt fluid, the past blending with the present. The clock, a symbol of linear time, stood as a silent witness to moments when those lines blurred. It was a constant reminder of the relentless march of time, even as people sought to defy its ultimate consequence, death. Perhaps the spirits were just trying to tell them it was time for dinner. The very weight and solidity of Victorian furniture also contributed to a sense of security, a feeling that one was protected within the confines of the home. This sense of security was particularly important when inviting the unseen into one's living space. The furniture, therefore, served not only as a stage for spiritual encounters, but also as a comforting shield against the unknown. It was like a big, sturdy hug from your daycare. And finally, the social rituals surrounding these gatherings, often conducted in these grand parlors, lent themselves to the formal and impressive nature of the furniture. People dressed in their finest, observed strict etiquette, and approached the seance with a mixture of solemnity and nervous excitement. The furniture, with its inherent formality, reinforced this sense of occasion. It transformed a simple room into a sacred space, a portal to another dimension, a place where you could politely ask a ghost for butter. As you settle deeper into the plush armchair, you become more attuned to the subtle sounds of the house. The faint creak of floorboards overhead, the soft whisper of the gaslight, and perhaps, just perhaps, a faint rustle that isn't the fabric of your own clothing. The furniture around you, with its dark, reflective surfaces, seems to absorb the dim light, creating an atmosphere of deep shadows and hushed secrets. It's a space designed for introspection, for whispered conversations, and for confronting the uncomfortable edges of reality. You notice the way the light glints off the polished edge of a side table, making it seem almost alive, a silent sentinel in the shadowy room. The elaborate carvings that adorned so much of this furniture were not merely decorative. They often told stories, depicted allegories, or incorporated symbols of mortality and the afterlife. Think of the popular motifs of weeping willows, draped urns, or even cherubs with mournful expressions. These weren't just artistic choices. They were deeply embedded in the Victorian cultural consciousness, a constant visual reminder of loss, remembrance, and the enduring hope of reunion. This emotional resonance made the furniture feel not just functional, but deeply meaningful, particularly to those grieving or seeking solace in spiritualism. It's like having a constant visual reminder that, yes, death is sad, but maybe your deceased aunt is just chilling in the afterlife. One quirky or fringe tidbit from the period is the practice of spirit photography, where blurry, ghostly figures would appear alongside living subjects in photographs. Often, these figures were composites, but the belief was that the spirits themselves were manifesting. And interestingly, the furniture in the background often provided a stable, recognizable element against which the ethereal figures could be contrasted. A spectral hand resting on a solid, carved chair arm lent an eerie realism to the image, blurring the lines between the tangible and the intangible. It truly showed how much the furniture was considered a part of the real world, even when the spirits weren't. The very concept of a drawing room or parlor in the Victorian era was central to social life. These were the public-facing rooms of the house, where guests were entertained, and where the family showcased their wealth and taste. The furniture in these rooms was therefore chosen to impress, to convey a sense of gravitas and respectability. When spiritualism became fashionable, these same impressive rooms and their furnishings provided the perfect backdrop. It added a layer of legitimacy and seriousness to the proceedings, suggesting that such profound encounters were only fitting for such grand surroundings. It's hard to take a ghost seriously if they're appearing in your scullery, isn't it? Historians still argue whether the mediums themselves truly believed in their powers, or if they were largely clever entrepreneurs capitalizing on a widespread cultural phenomenon. Regardless of their personal conviction, the furniture played a crucial role in facilitating their performances, whether genuine or otherwise. The heavy drapes, the dim lighting, the solid tables for wrapping, the cabinets for manifestations, all contributed to the theatricality and credibility of the seance. It was a stage set for the supernatural, and the furniture was the immovable cast. You observe a heavy, dark wood bookshelf crammed with volumes, some leather-bound and imposing, others with worn cloth covers. While not directly involved in spiritual communication, such a piece of furniture speaks to the intellectual curiosity of the era, a thirst for knowledge that encompassed not just science and literature, but also the unseen world. Books on spiritualism, mesmerism, and occult philosophy would have nestled comfortably alongside novels and scientific treatises, reflecting the era's open-minded, albeit sometimes credulous, approach to the mysteries of existence. Perhaps a spectral hand would occasionally pull a volume from a high shelf, just to prove a point about literacy. The comfort level of the furniture also played an often underestimated role. Engaging with the unknown, sitting in the dark, and awaiting contact with spirits could be an unsettling experience. Plush seating, soft fabrics, and ergonomic designs, to the extent they existed in the 19th century, provided a degree of physical comfort that could help ease the psychological tension. A comfortable participant was a more receptive participant, less likely to be distracted by physical discomfort and more able to focus on the elusive whispers from beyond. Well, at least my back won't ache when the ghost starts speaking in tongues, you might think, adjusting your posture. One mainstream historical fact is the devastating impact of high mortality rates in the 19th century, particularly from diseases like cholera, tuberculosis, and childhood illnesses. This constant presence of death made the desire to connect with deceased loved ones incredibly powerful. Spiritualism offered solace, a glimmer of hope that death was not the final word. The furniture, especially pieces that were part of family life, became imbued with the memories of the departed, making them natural focal points for those seeking to bridge the divide. A child's rocking horse, still in the nursery, might become a poignant link to a lost son or daughter. The very act of furnishing a home in the Victorian era was an elaborate process, often involving custom-made pieces or extensive shopping trips to established furniture makers. The long-term investment in these substantial pieces meant they were built to last, often passed down through generations. This longevity meant that furniture accumulated history, becoming silent witnesses to multiple lives and perhaps multiple deaths. This accrued history made them seem more alive, in a way, more capable of retaining the echoes of the past. It's like a piece of furniture developing its own spiritual seniority. You notice the elaborate, often almost claustrophobic, arrangement of furniture in some Victorian parlors. Rather than open spaces, rooms were often filled to capacity, creating a sense of intimacy and enclosure. This dense arrangement could also enhance the feeling of being trapped or surrounded by unseen forces during a séance, making any subtle movements or sounds seem more pronounced. It created a labyrinthine quality, where shadows could play tricks and the familiar could suddenly become unsettling. You half expect a phantom arm to reach out from behind a particularly voluminous velvet curtain. The use of mirrors in Victorian parlors was also common, and these, too, played a subtle role in the spiritualist aesthetic. Mirrors were often considered portals to other dimensions, reflecting not just the physical world but also hinting at something beyond. Placed strategically, they could create illusions of depth or movement, adding to the general sense of mystery and potential for otherworldly encounters. You glimpse your own reflection in a large, ornate mirror, and for a fleeting moment you wonder if another, more ethereal reflection might appear beside your own. "Hello, is it me you're looking for?" you hum quietly to yourself. The sheer solidity and craftsmanship of the furniture also lent an air of authenticity to the spiritualist movement. If a table could withstand repeated levitations or wrappings without falling apart, it certainly suggested a powerful, if invisible, force at work. Flabby, poorly constructed furniture would simply collapse under such stress, undermining the credibility of the entire enterprise. So, in a way, the integrity of the furniture was directly tied to the perceived integrity of the spiritual phenomena. No flimsy particle board in a proper seance room. Finally, the furniture of the 19th century, with its rich materials and often dark finishes, contributed to the overall sense of Gothic romanticism that permeated the era. This was a time that reveled in melancholy, in the mysterious, and in the sublime. The dark woods and brooding designs of the furniture perfectly encapsulated this aesthetic, setting the stage for encounters with the unknown. It was furniture that understood the mood of the moment, a silent accomplice in the pursuit of spectral thrills. It was basically the furniture equivalent of a dramatic, brooding protagonist. The quiet hum of the gaslight continues to fill the room, a constant, gentle presence that underscores the stillness. You run your hand over the smooth, cool surface of a marble-topped console table. Marble, with its cool, unyielding nature, was often chosen for its perceived purity and ability to remain unblemished, even in the most chaotic of seances. It's an interesting contrast to the warmer woods, providing a cool, solid anchor in a room often filled with fervent emotion. You wonder if the spirits appreciated the smooth surface for their ethereal dances, or if they found it a bit too chilly. One mainstream historical fact about 19th century society is its intense fascination with death and mourning rituals. The elaborate customs surrounding funerals, embalming, and periods of mourning often extended into the home, transforming it into a kind of memorial space. Photography of the deceased, locks of hair, and even post-mortem portraits were common. This pervasive culture of remembrance created a natural bridge to spiritualism, as people sought to extend their connection to the departed beyond the grave. The furniture, having been present for both life and death, served as a poignant reminder of these connections. You might imagine a tear-soaked handkerchief tucked away in a drawer of this very console. The heavy drapes, meticulously folded and tied back with ornate tassels, are not just for privacy. They contribute significantly to the acoustic properties of the room. Their thick fabric absorbs sound, creating a hushed environment where even the faintest whisper or rap could be clearly heard. This deliberate sound dampening was crucial for enhancing the perceived clarity of spiritual communications. Without the muffling effect of the heavy textiles, the room would echo, making it harder to discern subtle noises. It's the original soundproofing for a ghostly concert. You notice a small, exquisitely crafted music box on a side table. While not directly involved in a seance, such an object speaks to the Victorian appreciation for intricate mechanisms and hidden wonders. The delicate melodies it plays, perhaps a mournful tune, could easily set a melancholic or ethereal mood, preparing the minds of those present for communication with the beyond. And if the music box started playing on its own, well, that was a sure sign a spirit was in the room, perhaps one who enjoyed a good waltz. Oh, Aunt Agnes, still so fond of the blue Danube, you might whisper with a smile. Historians still debate the extent to which science and spiritualism influenced each other in the 19th century. On one hand, many spiritualists attempted to apply scientific methodologies to their investigations, using instruments to measure alleged spirit energy or documenting phenomena meticulously. On the other hand, many scientists vehemently dismissed spiritualism as fraud or delusion. Yet, the very act of trying to prove spiritual phenomena using tangible objects like furniture shows a fascinating interplay between these two seemingly disparate fields. Was it a desperate attempt to bridge the gap, or just a clever use of scientific trappings for a mystical pursuit. The sheer size and robust construction of much of the 19th century furniture were also a reflection of the era's engineering prowess. Advances in woodworking tools and techniques allowed for the creation of larger, more complex pieces. This robust construction wasn't just aesthetic, it was functional, particularly when the furniture was subjected to the stresses of a seance. A table that could withstand being tipped and rattled night after night had to be well built. They don't make them like they used to. You might nod approvingly, thinking of the furniture, not necessarily the ghosts. A quirky or fringe tidbit concerns the belief in psychometry, the ability to gain information about an object's history and associations by touching it. Spiritualists would sometimes hold seances where participants would touch pieces of furniture, believing that the object itself retained the psychic impressions of past events or individuals. This made old, well-used furniture particularly valuable for such experiments, as it was thought to be saturated with history and emotional residue. Imagine touching a chair and suddenly having a vision of a Victorian tea party, complete with ghostly crinolines and polite coughs. The very concept of a haunted object gained significant traction in this period, and furniture, being so intimately connected with domestic life, was a prime candidate. A cradle that rocked itself, a painting with eyes that followed you, a chest of drawers that inexplicably opened. These were the stuff of ghost stories and real-life investigations. The furniture, therefore, became an extension of the haunting itself, a physical manifestation of an unseen presence. It meant the ghost had a very specific address within the house. You'll find him in the old rocking chair, third room on the left. You notice the proliferation of display cabinets and curio stands, filled with exotic artifacts and personal mementos. These weren't just decorative, they were physical repositories of memory and, for some, potential conduits for spiritual energy. Each item had a story, a connection to a distant land or a departed loved one. The act of collecting and displaying these objects reflected a Victorian desire to categorize, to understand, and to contain the vastness of the world, even the unseen parts of it. Perhaps a spirit would use a particularly interesting vase as a temporary landing spot. The furniture also acted as a kind of silent witness, absorbing the emotional energy of the room. The grief of those seeking contact, the excitement of a new phenomenon, the apprehension of the unknown. All of these emotions would subtly permeate the environment. It's almost as if the very fibers of the wood, the weave of the fabric, retained these energetic imprints, making the furniture feel more than just inanimate objects. If these walls could talk, you think, they'd probably tell us to stop bothering the dead. The use of specific types of wood for different pieces also reflected prevailing beliefs. Oak, known for its strength and longevity, might be chosen for a sturdy dining table where families gathered for generations. Mahogany, prized for its deep luster and exotic origins, might adorn a formal parlor. Each wood had its own character, its own perceived properties, and this undoubtedly played into the subconscious associations people made when conducting their spiritual experiments. It was like choosing the right kind of conductor for a very particular kind of electricity. The strict social etiquette of the Victorian era, which extended to gatherings like seances, meant that certain behaviors were expected. Participants would sit quietly, respectfully, often with their hands linked around a table. The furniture provided the necessary structure for these rituals, defining the physical space and encouraging the desired decorum. It was a physical framework for a very specific kind of social interaction, one that straddled the line between parlor game and sacred ceremony. You wouldn't want to slouch while communing with the beyond, would you? Finally, the craftsmanship itself was a testament to the era's values. Hand-carved details, intricate inlays, and precise joinery all spoke of dedication, patience, and a deep respect for the material. This devotion to craftsmanship could be seen as mirroring the spiritualist's devotion to uncovering the truths of the afterlife. Both involved meticulous effort and a belief in something beyond the superficial. The furniture was a material manifestation of this deeper societal yearning. It was furniture built to last, just like their hopes for eternal life. The silence in the room deepens, punctuated only by the occasional settling creak of the old house. Your eyes trace the patterns on the wallpaper, an intricate floral design that seems to bloom and fade in the shifting gaslight. This visual richness, so characteristic of Victorian interiors, provided a stimulating, almost overwhelming backdrop that could contribute to a sense of heightened awareness, or perhaps a gentle disassociation from the mundane. It's easy for your mind to wander, to see faces in the patterns, to imagine a faint shimmer in your peripheral vision against such a busy background. One quirky or fringe tidbit of the era relates to the belief in magnetic fluid, or animal magnetism, popularized by Franz Mesmer. This invisible fluid was thought to flow through individuals and objects, and mediums were sometimes believed to be able to manipulate it to cause physical phenomena, including the movement of furniture. This concept, though lacking scientific basis, provided a pseudo-scientific explanation for phenomena like table tipping or levitation, lending an air of intellectual credibility to the proceedings. So, perhaps the table wasn't being levitated by a ghost, but by a very strong magnetic aura from the medium. Who knew furniture could be so magnetic? The sheer volume of furniture in a Victorian home also meant that there were more objects to potentially haunt or become associated with a spiritual presence. Every chair, every table, every cabinet presented a new opportunity for a ghostly manifestation. This abundance of material objects inadvertently created a rich playground for the unseen, a veritable spectral obstacle course. It was like a buffet for the spirits, with plenty of options to choose from for their dramatic entrances. Historians still argue about the true motivations behind the widespread acceptance of spiritualism. Was it a genuine search for comfort and meaning in a world grappling with high mortality and scientific upheaval? Or was it a form of entertainment, a thrilling parlor game that offered a frisson of danger and mystery? The lavish furniture and theatrical settings certainly suggest that entertainment played a significant role, regardless of the underlying belief. It was, in many ways, the original immersive theater experience, with ghosts as the star performers. You find your gaze lingering on an ornate fire screen, its brass polished to a dull gleam. Even inanimate objects like this, often adorned with mythological creatures or allegorical figures, contributed to the overall mystical atmosphere. They subtly reinforced the idea that the world was filled with hidden meanings and unseen forces, preparing the mind for the extraordinary. And if the flames in the fireplace suddenly danced unnaturally, well, that was just another piece of evidence, wasn't it? Looks like someone's turning up the heat in here, you might chuckle nervously. The fashion for dark wood and heavy, robust designs in furniture wasn't just about aesthetics. It was also practical. These pieces were built to last, capable of withstanding generations of use, and crucially, the often vigorous activities of a seance. A flimsy piece of furniture would quickly fall apart under the stress of wrappings, table tilting, or even alleged levitations. The durability of the furniture thus reinforced the perceived power and authenticity of the spiritual phenomena. It's hard to be impressed by a spirit that can only make a wobbly table creak. One mainstream historical fact is the rise of industrialization and mass production in the 19th century. While much of the fancy furniture remained handcrafted for the wealthy, new manufacturing techniques made more affordable, though still substantial, pieces available to the burgeoning middle class. This meant that the trappings of spiritualism, including the necessary furniture, became more accessible to a wider demographic, further fueling the movement's growth. It democratized the ghost hunt, allowing everyone to participate, regardless of their income bracket. The very arrangement of furniture within a Victorian parlor often encouraged a circular formation, naturally conducive to a séance. A round table in the center, surrounded by chairs, created an intimate, enclosed space where energy could be focused and shared. This deliberate spatial organization wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about creating the optimal environment for spiritual communication. It was like designing a spiritual Faraday cage, only much prettier. You notice the intricate details on the upholstery, the subtle patterns, the rich textures of velvet and brocade. These tactile elements added another layer to the sensory experience of a séance. The feeling of the fabric against your skin, the visual richness of the patterns, all contributed to an immersive environment that could make the unseen feel more real. It was a holistic sensory experience designed to blur the lines between the ordinary and the extraordinary. This velvet feels positively spectral, you might think, rubbing the fabric between your fingers. The concept of a family home was incredibly strong in the Victorian era, and the furniture within it was often seen as an extension of the family's identity and history. Each piece might have memories associated with it: births, deaths, celebrations. This deep emotional connection to the furniture could easily be leveraged in spiritualist séances, as mediums would often speak of spirits communicating through objects that held sentimental value. It was a deeply personal form of communication, rooted in the very fabric of one's domestic life. Imagine your grandmother's favorite armchair suddenly whispering secrets. The dark, often somber hues of Victorian furniture, combined with the dim gaslight, created an atmosphere that was both mysterious and slightly foreboding. This visual aesthetic perfectly complemented the themes of death, the afterlife, and the unknown that were central to spiritualism. It was furniture that understood the gravity of the situation, a silent, dark companion in the search for answers beyond the veil. It's hard to conduct a serious séance in a brightly lit room with pastel furniture, isn't it? The use of highly polished surfaces, particularly on wood and metal, was also common. These surfaces would reflect the flickering gaslight, creating a dynamic play of light and shadow that could easily be interpreted as ghostly movement or ethereal presences. A sudden glint off a polished table leg might be dismissed as a trick of the light, or it might be seen as a sign from the other side. The ambiguity was part of the allure. Did that candlestick just shimmer, or am I just tired? You ponder, your eyelids feeling heavy. Finally, the furniture of the 19th century, with its inherent sense of permanence and tradition, offered a comforting stability in a world that was undergoing rapid and often disorienting change. Scientific discoveries were challenging old beliefs, and industrialization was transforming society at an unprecedented pace. In this fluid environment, the solid, unwavering presence of elaborate furniture provided a psychological anchor, a reminder of enduring values and a tangible link to a seemingly more stable past. It was a sturdy, reliable presence, even if the spirits it hosted were anything but. The air around you feels heavy, not with dust, but with an almost palpable sense of history. You find yourself focusing on the intricate patterns of the rug beneath your feet, its faded colors still hinting at a past vibrancy. This attention to detail, from the grand furniture to the humble floor coverings, created a rich sensory environment that could lull the mind into a state of heightened receptivity, making it easier to perceive the subtle manifestations of the unseen. Or perhaps just easier to imagine them. One mainstream historical fact is the emergence of various spiritualist organizations and societies throughout the 19th century. These groups, often meeting in private homes or rented halls, codified practices, exchanged ideas, and even published their own journals. The need for consistent, reliable furniture for their seances and demonstrations meant that certain types of tables and cabinets became emblematic of the movement. It wasn't just about individual belief. It was about building a communal experience, often centered around specific, well-appointed CES of furniture. It was like forming a club, but your clubhouse decor was designed for ghosts. You observe a large, imposing grandfather clock in the corner, its slow, steady tick-tock a persistent reminder of the passage of time. Yet in a seance, time often seemed to warp to become circular, allowing past and present to merge. The clock, a symbol of linear progression, stood as a paradoxical sentinel, observing moments when the boundaries of chronology blurred. And if its pendulum suddenly stopped, or if it chimed an unbidden hour, well, that was a sign, wasn't it? Either a spirit's here or I forgot to wind it, you might joke, though your heart skips a beat. A quirky or fringe tidbit from the time is the practice of materialization, where mediums would purportedly manifest physical forms of spirits, sometimes even allowing them to be touched. These manifestations often occurred within the confines of a spirit cabinet or behind a curtain, and the solid construction of the cabinet provided a convincing space for such a dramatic reveal. The furniture essentially acted as a physical stage for the spirit, giving it a tangible presence, even if only fleeting. It's like having a special prop for your ghost to appear from, only the prop is a very solid piece of furniture. Historians still debate the role of psychological suggestion in spiritualist phenomena. Did the dim lighting, the hushed atmosphere, and the presence of suggestive furniture create a psychological environment where people were more likely to perceive phenomena that weren't actually there? Or did these elements simply enhance the experience of genuine communication? The power of the human mind to interpret ambiguous stimuli is immense, and the Victorian parlor was a perfect laboratory for such psychological exploration. It was a mental playground for both believers and skeptics. The very concept of home in the Victorian era was deeply entwined with ideas of sanctuary, refuge, and family. The furniture within the home contributed to this sense of security and belonging. When spiritualism entered the domestic sphere, the familiar and comforting presence of the furniture provided a safe space for engaging with the potentially unsettling unknown. It was like bringing a scary movie to your living room, but with your favorite comfy blanket. You notice the detailed craftsmanship of a small, decorative screen, its panels adorned with delicate embroidery. Such objects, while seemingly insignificant, added to the overall visual density of the room, creating an environment where the eye could constantly find new details to focus on. This visual engagement could subtly distract the rational mind, making it more open to suggestion and less critical of ambiguous phenomena. It was like a visual lullaby for the skeptical part of your brain. The emphasis on dark, rich wood and heavy, ornate designs also reflected a certain Victorian gravitas, a seriousness that permeated their approach to life, death, and everything in between. This wasn't a frivolous era, and even their parlor games like seances were often approached with a solemnity that mirrored the decor. The furniture wasn't just there, it meant something. It conveyed an unspoken message of dignity and solemnity, even when the spirits were being a bit mischievous. "Excuse me, Mr. Poltergeist, but this is a very serious mahogany table." One interesting aspect is the way in which furniture could be used to create illusions of movement or sound. A well-placed thread, a hidden mechanism, or even just the natural settling of old wood could be interpreted as spectral activity. The solidity of the furniture made these subtle movements all the more convincing, as they seemed to defy the inherent immobility of the objects themselves. It was a testament to both the cleverness of some mediums and the fervent belief of their audiences. The sensory details of the room are striking. The feel of the cool, smooth wood, the faint scent of beeswax polish, the soft rustle of heavy fabrics, and the muted clinking of the gaslight. All these elements combine to create an immersive, almost dreamlike environment. This sensory richness could help to induce a state of altered consciousness, making individuals more susceptible to unusual perceptions and experiences. It was a carefully curated experience, from the look of the room to the very feel of the furniture. The furniture also provided a sense of continuity. Homes were often passed down through generations, and the furniture with them. This meant that a table might have witnessed weddings, births, and deaths, accumulating the emotional history of a family. When spiritualists sought to contact deceased family members, the very furniture that had been present during their lives became a tangible link, a silent repository of memories and emotional resonance. It was like having a living family tree, but made of wood and upholstery. You imagine the countless conversations, both mundane and profound, that these pieces of furniture had silently overseen. The hushed whispers of secrets, the booming laughter of celebrations, the quiet sobs of grief. Each scratch, each worn patch, a subtle testament to the lives lived around them. This inherent history made them powerful symbols in the context of spiritualism, objects that had literally absorbed the human experience. It makes you wonder if they ever felt like gossiping about their former occupants. Finally, the Victorian obsession with classification and order extended even to their furniture. Each piece had a designated place, a specific function. This sense of order provided a comforting structure in a world that often felt chaotic. And within this order, the disruption of a ghostly presence, a chair moving on its own, a curtain swaying without a breeze, was all the more startling and convincing. The disruption of the mundane by the extraordinary was precisely what made it so compelling. Everything in its place, except for that pesky ghost. The quiet of the parlor seems to press in around you, an almost physical weight. You shift slightly in your chair, the gentle creak of the springs echoing softly in the stillness. Your eyes drift to the dark, highly polished surface of a grand piano in the corner. While primarily a source of entertainment, music often played a significant role in seances. Its evocative melodies used to induce a trance-like state or to provide an atmospheric backdrop for spiritual communications. Imagine a phantom hand gliding over the keys, coaxing out a haunting, unbidden melody. A truly impressive feat for a ghost or a very skilled medium. One mainstream historical fact about the 19th century is the burgeoning interest in mesmerism and hypnotism, often seen as precursors to modern psychology. These practices focused on the power of suggestion and the altered states of consciousness, which spiritualists often leveraged. The very act of sitting still, focusing on a single point, like a tipping table or a spirit cabinet, and being enveloped by the atmosphere created by the fancy furniture, could induce a suggestible state, making perceived spiritual phenomena more potent. It was like a very elaborate, furniture-assisted hypnotic induction. You notice the meticulous craftsmanship of a display case, its glass panes reflecting the dim light like distant eyes. Inside, delicate porcelain figurines and ornate curios are arranged with precision. These collections of objects, often exotic or sentimental, reinforced the Victorian fascination with material culture and the stories objects could tell. In the context of spiritualism, such items could be seen as possessing a lingering essence of their previous owners or origins, making them potential points of contact for spirits. Perhaps a spirit would choose to rearrange a figurine just to let you know they're still paying attention. Historians still debate the role of women in the spiritualist movement. Many mediums were women, and spiritualism offered them a public platform and a degree of authority that was often denied to them in mainstream Victorian society. The domestic setting, with its familiar and often elaborate furniture, provided a socially acceptable space for these women to exercise their unique talents, whether genuine or theatrical. The parlor, with its fancy furniture, became a stage for female empowerment, albeit in a rather unconventional way. A quirky or fringe tidbit concerns the practice of ectoplasm, a viscous, supposedly spiritual substance that mediums would allegedly exude during seances, often from their mouths or other orifices. This ectoplasm was said to be moldable and could take on various forms, sometimes even manifesting as ghostly hands or faces. While much of this was later exposed as fraud, often involving cheesecloth and creative lighting, the idea that a spirit could physically interact with the solid furniture via this strange substance further blurred the lines between the physical and the ethereal. Imagine a ghostly hand of ectoplasm trying to polish the mahogany table. It's a sticky situation, literally. The deliberate dimming of the gaslight, or even conducting seances in complete darkness, was a common practice. This wasn't just to create an atmosphere, it was also practical. In low light, it's much harder to discern details, making it easier for subtle manipulations to go unnoticed. The heavy, dark furniture, with its ability to blend into the shadows, further enhanced this effect, creating a nebulous environment where reality could be easily bent. Is that a ghost, or just Aunt Mildred's overly ornate hat stand? Became a common question. The very weight and solidity of Victorian furniture also provided a counterpoint to the ephemeral nature of the spirits. The contrast between the tangible, unmoving furniture and the supposedly intangible, mobile spirits made the latter seem all the more miraculo. It was a physical manifestation of the boundary between worlds, making the crossing of that boundary all the more dramatic and convincing. It's like having a very heavy anchor for your very light, ethereal sailboat. You feel a subtle draft, a faint whisper against your cheek that might just be the old house breathing, or something else entirely. The very architecture of Victorian homes, with their high ceilings, intricate cornices, and often rambling layouts, lent themselves to a sense of mystery and hidden spaces. The furniture, filling these grand rooms, seemed to absorb and amplify this inherent mystique, becoming part of the house's enigmatic character. Every dark corner, every shadowed alcove became a potential haunt. The social rituals surrounding a séance often involved participants holding hands around a table, creating a human chain. This physical connection was thought to amplify the spiritual energy. The furniture, specifically the table, became the nexus of this human spiritual circuit, a tangible point of contact between worlds. It was the original group hug for connecting with the other side. The widespread availability of publications on spiritualism, including how-to guides for conducting séances, meant that many people attempted these experiments in their own homes. The desire to replicate the phenomena described in these books, often involving the movement of tables or the appearance of rapping sounds, further drove the demand for suitable, sturdy furniture. You couldn't just use any old card table for a proper séance. You needed something with a bit of gravitas. The ornate details and elaborate craftsmanship of the furniture also provided numerous places for hidden devices or subtle tricks to be employed by fraudulent mediums. Secret compartments, spring-loaded panels, or even simple threads could be cleverly concealed within the intricate designs. The very beauty and complexity of the furniture could thus serve as a cover for deception, a Trojan horse of spiritual trickery. The ghost prefers the secret compartment in the mahogany secretaire, a particularly cunning medium might declare. Finally, the decorative elements themselves, the tassels, the fringe, the carved feet, often had a symbolic meaning in Victorian culture, even if it wasn't explicitly spiritual. The richness of texture and form was seen as a sign of refinement and a reflection of a well-ordered mind. When applied to the context of spiritualism, these details contributed to an overall sense of serious endeavor, transforming a parlor into a temple of the unseen. It was furniture that took its job very seriously, even if that job involved entertaining the dearly departed. The stillness in the room feels almost electric, as if the air itself is holding its breath. You notice the rich, earthy scent of polished wood, a smell that speaks of age and countless stories. Your gaze falls upon a large, intricately carved cabinet, perhaps a display cabinet or a wardrobe. These imposing pieces, often reaching almost to the ceiling, created a sense of verticality and grandeur within the room, making it feel more like a sacred space than a mere parlor. They were perfect for obscuring a medium or providing a dramatic backdrop for a materialized spirit. One mainstream historical fact from this era is the burgeoning interest in photography. As mentioned before, spirit photography became a popular, albeit controversial, phenomenon. Photographers would often capture ghostly apparitions alongside living subjects, and the solid, recognizable furniture in the background served as a stark contrast to the ethereal figures, making the supernatural elements appear more concrete and undeniable. It was like saying, "See, the ghost is definitely there, standing right next to Aunt Martha's favorite chaise lounge." A quirky or fringe tidbit from the 19th century relates to the concept of spiritual telegraphy. With the invention of the telegraph, people began to imagine that spirits could also communicate over long distances, much like a telegram. This led to mediums using planchette boards or even specially designed spirit telegraphs that resembled miniature telegraph machines, often placed on sturdy tables or desks. The furniture provided the necessary stable platform for these nascent communication devices, bridging the gap between cutting-edge technology and ancient spiritual belief. Imagine a ghost sending you a text, only it's through a wooden contraption on your dining table. Historians still debate the influence of literary Gothicism on the spiritualist movement. The popularity of Gothic novels with their themes of haunted castles, restless spirits, and hidden secrets certainly primed the public imagination for the possibility of supernatural encounters. The dark, ornate furniture of the Victorian home, often echoing the aesthetics of these Gothic tales, provided the perfect setting, blurring the lines between fiction and perceived reality. It was like living inside a ghost story, with all the right furniture to set the scene. You hear a faint rustle, a sound that could be the wind outside, or something far more intriguing. Your eyes are drawn to a chaise lounge, its velvet upholstery inviting you to recline. This type of furniture, designed for relaxation and contemplation, suggests that seances were not always high-strung, dramatic affairs, but could also be intimate, reflective experiences. It offered a comfortable vantage point from which to observe the unfolding mysteries, allowing for a relaxed posture that might facilitate a more receptive state of mind. Perhaps a nice lie-down will help me connect with Uncle Reginald, you muse, half-jokingly. The very density of Victorian furniture, often filling rooms to what we would now consider an overwhelming degree, created a sense of enclosed space. This enclosure could contribute to the feeling of being cut off from the outside world, enhancing the focus on the internal dynamics of the seance. It was like stepping into a different dimension, one walled off by solid oak and plush velvet. Every surface, every corner, held the potential for a secret. The emphasis on hand-carved details and intricate craftsmanship in fancy furniture also spoke to the value placed on skill and labor. These pieces were not mass-produced, disposable items. They were investments, designed to last. This inherent value and permanence lent a certain gravitas to the spiritual activities that took place around them. It meant that even the furniture itself seemed to understand the importance of the occasion. You wouldn't want a ghost to think you were cheap. One interesting aspect is how the furniture served as a backdrop for the various phenomena attributed to spirits. Whether it was the sound of a mysterious knock on a wooden cabinet, the sight of a table tilting, or the alleged levitation of an object, the furniture provided the stable, recognizable elements against which these extraordinary events could be witnessed. It was the physical anchor in a world that was suddenly becoming unfixed. The use of specific types of wood was often deliberate. Darker woods like mahogany and ebony were highly prized for their rich color and durability, and their somber tones certainly lent themselves to the Gothic aesthetic favored by many spiritualists. Lighter woods, while sometimes used for tipping tables, often felt less serious and less able to convey the gravitas required for deep spiritual communion. It was a matter of mood, even for the spirits. You imagine the countless hours spent by Victorians around these very tables, discussing everything from politics to poetry, from scientific discoveries to spiritual experiences. The furniture was the silent confidant, absorbing the intellectual and emotional life of the household. This deep immersion in human experience made them, in the eyes of many spiritualists, more likely to retain energetic imprints and thus more receptive to spiritual manipulation. The very idea of a haunted object was pervasive, and often it was the furniture that carried these spectral associations. A bed where someone died, a chair where a loved one always sat, a desk where important letters were penned. These items became imbued with the presence of the departed. The furniture wasn't just a container. It was a character in the ongoing narrative of the family and its connection to the afterlife. It was less about the ghost haunting the house and more about the ghost haunting that particularly comfortable armchair. The Victorian period was a time of immense social change and upheaval. The Industrial Revolution brought both progress and poverty. Science challenged religious dogma, and traditional social structures began to shift. In this rapidly changing world, spiritualism offered a sense of continuity, a way to connect with the past and find solace in the face of uncertainty. The familiar, solid presence of fancy furniture in the home offered a stable anchor in this turbulent sea of change, a grounding presence even when the spirits were causing a ruckus. Finally, the ritualistic nature of seances meant that the furniture played a crucial role in defining the sacred space. The circular arrangement of chairs around a table, the positioning of the medium and the participants, the deliberate removal of distractions, all contributed to creating a dedicated area for spiritual work. The furniture wasn't just decorative, it was a functional part of the spiritual architecture, a silent, weighty guardian of the veil between worlds. The air around you feels thick with the lingering scent of old books and perhaps a faint wisp of candle smoke, a remnant from a bygone era of seances. You are keenly aware of the silence, a profound quiet that seems to amplify every creak and groan of the old house. Your gaze is drawn to a display of framed silhouettes on a nearby wall, their stark black files against white backgrounds, a poignant reminder of lives lived and faces remembered. These were often created as mementos of the deceased, a tangible representation of a vanished presence, perfectly aligning with the spiritualist yearning to reconnect with those who had passed beyond the veil. One quirky or fringe tidbit from the period involves the use of spirit trumpets. These were conical tubes, sometimes made of metal but often of lightweight wood, through which spirits were supposedly able to speak more clearly. During seances, these trumpets would sometimes be seen to float around the room, or even tap out messages on the furniture. The solid furniture provided a convenient target for these airborne instruments, making the manifestation seem all the more real and direct. Imagine a trumpet floating over to your ear and a ghostly voice whispering, "Psst, it's time for more tea." The concept of spiritual contagion was also prevalent, where certain individuals or objects were thought to be particularly susceptible to spiritual influence. Old, well-used furniture, having been present for countless human interactions and emotions, was often considered more charged with this spiritual energy. This made antique pieces particularly prized by spiritualists, as they were believed to have a stronger connection to the past and its lingering presences. So that dusty old chest in the attic might just be a hotbed of paranormal activity. Historians still debate the psychological impact of repeated exposure to seance phenomena, whether genuine or staged. Did the sustained belief in communicating with the dead, facilitated by the tangible presence of objects like fancy furniture, lead to a form of shared delusion? Or did it provide genuine comfort and a sense of continued connection for the bereaved? The furniture, as a constant, reassuring presence, might have played a role in anchoring these experiences, lending them a sense of reality. You shift in your seat, the plush velvet cushions offering a surprising degree of comfort, almost as if designed to encourage long, contemplative hours. This comfort was paramount in a seance, as participants often remained seated for extended periods, waiting for phenomena to manifest. A physically comfortable participant was less likely to be distracted by discomfort and more likely to focus their mental energy on the task at hand, contacting the dead. It's hard to concentrate on ghostly whispers if your back is aching. The very density of Victorian furniture, often dark and imposing, contributed to the visual effect of filling a room. This maximalist approach created a sense of richness and abundance, but also a certain visual claustrophobia that could heighten the senses and create an almost dreamlike atmosphere conducive to spiritual experiences. The shadows cast by the heavy pieces could easily play tricks on the eyes, making inanimate objects seem to shift and move. You half expect a hidden drawer to slide open on its own accord, revealing an antique locket. One mainstream historical fact is the significant role of fraud in the spiritualist movement. Many mediums were eventually exposed as fakes, using clever mechanisms, sleight of hand, and confederates to create illusions of spiritual phenomena. The elaborate furniture, with its hidden compartments and sturdy construction, often served as perfect tools for these deceptions, allowing for props to be hidden or for mediums to manipulate objects unseen. It was a magician's dream set, disguised as a respectable parlor. The emphasis on the parlor as the primary setting for seances also meant that the furniture had to be both functional for the seance and aesthetically pleasing for general entertaining. This duality required a specific kind of design, sturdy enough for table tipping, but elegant enough to impress guests during a tea party. It was furniture that had to wear two hats, one for social calls and one for spectral ones. You notice a series of dark, highly polished picture frames, perhaps holding photographs of stern-faced ancestors. The very act of displaying these images was a way of keeping the deceased present in the home, a visual reminder of their continued influence. In the context of spiritualism, these photographs could act as focal points, visual anchors for the spirits of the depicted individuals, encouraging their presence during a seance. It's like having a dedicated VIP section for the ghosts of your family. The furniture also acted as a physical barrier, separating the participants from the chaotic, unseen forces they were attempting to contact. The solid wood and heavy upholstery offered a sense of protection, a tangible boundary between the living and the dead. It was a comforting thought. Even if a spirit was present, the furniture was there to keep a respectful distance. The Victorian fascination with curiosity cabinets, or cabinets of wonder, also played into the spiritualist aesthetic. These cabinets, often filled with exotic specimens, strange artifacts, and natural wonders, reflected a desire to collect and categorize the unknown. When such cabinets were present in a seance room, they added to the mystique, suggesting that the room itself was a repository of strange and wondrous things, including invisible spirits. Perhaps a rare specimen would suddenly animate, just to surprise you. The very darkness of the wood and the often somber colors of the upholstery contributed to the serious and often melancholic atmosphere of a Victorian parlor, particularly when a seance was underway. This visual tone perfectly complemented the gravity of communicating with the dead, reinforcing the idea that this was a profound, rather than a frivolous, undertaking. It was a room that understood the weight of the moment. Finally, the craftsmanship of the furniture was not merely about beauty, it was about integrity. The fact that these pieces were so well made, so durable, suggested a certain authenticity. If the furniture itself was solid and true, then perhaps the phenomena that occurred around it were also genuine. This psychological association was subtle but powerful, lending an air of credibility to the spiritualist claims. It was furniture that vouched for the ghosts. The silence in the room is so profound that you can almost hear the dust motes dancing in the faint light filtering through the heavy curtains. Your gaze is drawn to a set of matching armchairs, their dark wood gleaming, their plush upholstery beckoning. These chairs, strategically placed around a central table, form a silent circle, an unspoken invitation to connection, both human and spectral. The very arrangement of the furniture speaks of ritual, of a deliberate attempt to create a contained space for the unseen to manifest. One mainstream historical fact that profoundly influenced the 19th century fascination with death and the afterlife was the work of Charles Darwin. His theory of evolution, published in On the Origin of Species in 1859, challenged traditional religious beliefs and concepts of human uniqueness. For many, spiritualism offered a comforting alternative, a way to reconcile scientific advancements with a continued belief in the soul and an afterlife. The solid, unchanging furniture in a Victorian parlor provided a grounding presence amidst these profound philosophical shifts, a tangible anchor in a world grappling with new ideas. A quirky or fringe tidbit from the era involves spirit photography and the use of furniture as a backdrop. In some cases, photographers would position mediums or sitters in specific arrangements with furniture, believing that certain objects or configurations might encourage the manifestation of spirits in the photographic plate. The furniture acted as a kind of physical stage set for the ghostly performance, adding an air of legitimacy to the otherwise ambiguous images. Imagine a ghost posing perfectly by a grandfather clock, knowing it's their moment to shine. Historians still debate the psychological efficacy of seances for grieving individuals. Did the shared experience, the comforting rituals, and the belief in communication with the deceased genuinely provide solace and aid in the grieving process? Or was it merely a temporary illusion that postponed genuine acceptance of loss? The presence of familiar furniture, imbued with personal memories, undoubtedly played a role in creating a comforting environment, regardless of the ultimate truth of the spiritual contact. It was a place where grief could find a temporary, furniture-assisted release. You notice the presence of many small, decorative tables and pedestals, each holding a vase of dried flowers, a porcelain statuette, or a collection of small books. These incidental pieces, while seemingly minor, contributed to the overall density and visual richness of the Victorian interior. This visual noise could inadvertently serve to distract the conscious mind, making it more open to subconscious suggestion and the subtle perceptions of the unseen. It's like a sensory overload that somehow makes you more receptive to the subtle whispers of the beyond. The emphasis on honest construction in Victorian furniture, with its visible joinery and sturdy materials, resonated with a societal value placed on authenticity and truth, even as the spiritualist movement itself was often accused of fraud. The integrity of the furniture seemed to subtly endorse the integrity of the phenomena, creating a subconscious trust in the environment. It was furniture that looked you in the eye and said, "I wouldn't lie to you. Not about this." The very act of sitting around a table in a circular formation, often holding hands, was a ritualistic act designed to create a collective energy. The table itself became the central nexus of this energy, a physical focal point for the group's intentions. The choice of a sturdy, well-made table was therefore crucial, as it needed to withstand the physical and energetic demands of the seance. You wouldn't want your spiritual connection to be disrupted by a wobbly leg. You feel a slight chill in the air, though the room is warm. Your eyes scan the shadows that cling to the corners of the room, made deeper by the heavy furniture. The interplay of light and shadow, inherent in the gaslit Victorian parlor, was a master medium's friend, Shadows could conceal, distort, and create illusions of movement, making the unseen seem almost tangible. The dark, imposing furniture provided the perfect canvas for these fleeting, spectral dances. Is that a ghost or just a very enthusiastic dust bunny? You ponder, a small smile touching your lips. The Victorian fascination with memento mori, reminders of mortality, permeated their art, literature, and home decor. Skulls, hourglasses, and symbolic representations of decay were not uncommon. While not directly furniture, the general aesthetic of somber contemplation contributed to the acceptance of dark, heavy furniture, which in turn created an appropriate atmosphere for addressing the ultimate memento mori, death itself. It was furniture that understood the gravity of existence. The use of specific room types for seances, particularly the parlor or drawing room, further highlights the importance of the furniture. These were the formal, public-facing rooms of the house, designed for entertaining and showcasing social status. Conducting a seance in such a room lent it an air of respectability and seriousness, elevating the activity beyond mere superstition to a form of dignified inquiry. It was a formal invitation to the other side, and the furniture dressed for the occasion. The very act of touching the furniture during a seance, whether consciously or unconsciously, could provide a tangible grounding point for participants experiencing strange phenomena. The solidity of the wood, the texture of the fabric, provided a physical anchor in moments of disorientation, a reminder of the physical world even as the spiritual world seemed to intrude. It was like a very large, reassuring security blanket made of polished wood. Finally, the intricate details and ornamentation of the furniture provided a wealth of visual information, constantly engaging the eye. This visual richness could serve as a distraction, preventing overanalysis and encouraging a more intuitive, less critical way of perceiving the world. It was furniture designed to enchant, both literally and figuratively, making the unseen seem more plausible within its ornate embrace. The silence in the room continues to envelop you, punctuated now by the almost imperceptible rustle of your own breath. You notice the deep, rich sheen of the mahogany, reflecting the faint gaslight like a still, dark pool. This reflective quality, particularly on highly polished surfaces, allowed the ambient light to dance and shimmer, creating subtle, fleeting patterns that could easily be interpreted as ghostly movements or energetic fluctuations. It was an unintentional, yet highly effective, visual trick for those eager to believe. One mainstream historical fact is the significant role of fraud and trickery in the spiritualist movement of the 19th century. While many sincere believers existed, numerous mediums were exposed as charlatans, using clever devices and sleight of hand to create illusions. The fancy furniture, with its robust construction, hidden compartments, and ornate designs, often proved to be the perfect accomplice for these deceptions. A seemingly solid cabinet could have a secret door, a heavy table a hidden lever. It turns out, ghosts are quite good at carpentry, or at least, people pretending to be ghosts are. A quirky or fringe tidbit from the era relates to the use of rapping boards, or Ouija boards, which gained popularity towards the end of the century. These boards, with their letters and numbers, were often placed on sturdy tables, providing a flat, stable surface for the planchette to glide across, spelling out messages from the spirits. The furniture provided the crucial foundation for this form of communication, a silent partner in the ghostly dialogues. It was like the original keyboard, only operated by an unseen force. Historians still debate the extent to which spiritualism was a form of social escapism for Victorians. In a society with rigid social norms and often harsh realities, did the pursuit of spiritual contact offer a temporary release, a fantasy world where the rules of decorum could be bent and the boundaries of reality blurred? The elaborate, theatrical settings of the seances, complete with impressive furniture, certainly contributed to this sense of escaping the mundane. It was a lavish stage for a dramatic break from reality. You find your gaze drifting to a large, decorative screen, its panels painted with pastoral scenes or exotic landscapes. These screens were often used to create intimate alcoves within larger rooms, or to conceal a medium during particularly dramatic manifestations. The furniture provided the necessary structure for these divisions of space, allowing for a controlled environment where the phenomena could unfold, whether genuine or artfully constructed. It was like setting up a private stage for a very exclusive ghostly performance. The very concept of weight and solidity in Victorian furniture was paramount. These pieces were built to convey permanence, stability, and enduring value. In the context of spiritualism, this inherent weight created a striking contrast with the supposed lightness and ethereal nature of the spirits. When a heavy table began to move, or a solid cabinet seemingly opened on its own, the effect was all the more startling precisely because of the furniture's inherent immobility. It was the ultimate test of a ghost's strength. Can you move this very large, very heavy object? The prevalence of dark woods, such as mahogany, walnut, and ebony, in Victorian furniture was not just a stylistic choice. It also served a practical purpose in dimly lit seance rooms. Dark surfaces absorb more light, deepening the shadows and making it harder for the eye to discern subtle movements or details. This visual ambiguity was a key component in fostering the belief in unseen forces at play. It was furniture that was literally designed to help things disappear. One interesting aspect is the way furniture became anthropomorphized in ghost stories and popular lore. A rocking chair that rocked on its own, a mirror that reflected past events, a bed where a spectral figure often appeared. These pieces of furniture were not just objects. They became characters in the haunting, imbued with their own histories and spectral associations. They were like the supporting cast in a ghostly play. The sheer scale of some Victorian furniture, from towering armoires to sprawling sideboards, could make a room feel smaller and more enclosed, intensifying the sense of intimacy and heightened awareness during a seance. This deliberate density of objects created a rich, sensory environment that could overwhelm the rational mind and make it more receptive to unusual perceptions. It was like being enveloped by the spirits and by a lot of very large furniture. The decorative elements on the furniture, the carvings, the inlays, the elaborate brass fittings, often hinted at hidden meanings or symbolic interpretations. These intricate details provided a feast for the eyes, drawing attention away from the more mundane aspects of the room and towards the potential for mystery and wonder. They were silent prompts for the imagination, encouraging the mind to seek out the unseen. The social ritual of the seance, with participants often sitting in a specific formation around a table, highlighted the furniture's role as a communal gathering point. It was a shared experience, and the furniture provided the physical structure for that shared engagement. It literally brought people together to face the unknown, often with a sturdy piece of wood between them. The comfort of the upholstery, the softness of the cushions, and the ergonomic consideration in the design of chairs and sofas, even in the 19th century, meant that participants could endure long seances without excessive physical discomfort. This allowed for sustained focus and a greater chance for phenomena to occur, or at least to be perceived. My spiritual awakening will be far more enjoyable if I'm not fidgeting, a Victorian might have thought. Finally, the durability and longevity of Victorian furniture meant that pieces could be passed down through generations, accumulating history and emotional resonance. This inherent story within the furniture made it a powerful symbol for spiritualists, who believed that objects could retain the psychic impressions of past events and individuals. It was furniture that remembered and perhaps allowed others to remember too. The deep quiet of the room is punctuated by the soft, rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock, a steady beat against the backdrop of stillness. You find your gaze drawn to the rich, dark patterns of the wallpaper, its intricate design appearing almost alive in the shifting gaslight. This visual density and the interplay of light and shadow created a hypnotic effect, a subtle visual distraction that could lull the mind into a more receptive state for the subtle, or not-so-subtle manifestations of spiritual phenomena. It was a form of visual mesmerism, subtly preparing the audience for the unseen. One quirky or fringe tidbit of the era was the concept of spirit messages appearing on slates or in locked boxes. Mediums would often use small wooden slates, sometimes hinged, and place them on a table or in a cabinet, claiming that spirits would write messages on them. The solid furniture provided the perfect surface for these slates, and also offered ideal hidden places for any pre-written messages or clever mechanisms. It was like a very old-fashioned, ghostly whiteboard presentation. The widespread availability of various parlor tricks and illusions in the 19th century, often sold in magic shops, mirrored the phenomena observed in seances. This overlap contributed to the skepticism surrounding spiritualism, as critics argued that mediums were simply employing well-known stage magic. However, the sophisticated furniture in respectable homes lent an air of seriousness to the proceedings, suggesting that this was more than mere entertainment, even if the methods were sometimes similar. It was a fine line between a magic show and a spiritual revelation, and the furniture often blurred it. Historians still argue about the precise reasons for the decline of spiritualism in the early 20th century. Was it the widespread exposure of fraudulent mediums, the rise of new scientific paradigms, or simply a shift in cultural interests? Regardless, the elaborate, heavy furniture that had been so central to its practice largely remained, perhaps serving as a quiet, unchanging testament to a fervent, yet ultimately transient, cultural obsession. The ghosts might have moved on, but the armoires stayed put. You notice a small, highly polished display stand, perhaps holding a miniature portrait or a prized locket. These individual objects, often imbued with deep personal significance, could become powerful focal points for spiritual energy. The furniture that held them elevated their status, framing them as objects of reverence and potential connection to the unseen. It was a tangible link to a world beyond, held securely on a sturdy piece of wood. The very darkness of the woods used in Victorian furniture, combined with the dim gaslight, created an atmosphere of mystery and introspection. This was not the bright, airy aesthetic of later eras. It was designed for shadows, for secrets, and for the serious business of confronting the unknown. The furniture itself seemed to emanate a brooding stillness, perfectly setting the mood for a ghostly encounter. It was like the furniture was wearing its very best serious face for the occasion. One mainstream historical fact that influenced the spiritualist movement was the growth of investigative journalism and skepticism. As spiritualism gained popularity, so too did efforts to debunk its claims. Many journalists and magicians actively worked to expose fraudulent mediums, often demonstrating how the same effects could be achieved using mundane means, sometimes even employing similar furniture. The battle between belief and skepticism played out on the very stage of the Victorian parlor, with the furniture as a silent witness. The social function of the parlor itself was key. It was a space for formal entertaining, for intellectual discussion, and for displays of culture and refinement. When séances were held in these rooms, they adopted the existing social conventions, lending them an air of respectability and intellectual gravitas. The furniture, as an integral part of this social landscape, reinforced that perception. You wouldn't want a ghost to think you were uncivilized after all. You feel a lingering coolness in the air, a breath that seems to pass through you rather than around you. The inherent age of much of the furniture, often antique or passed down through generations, contributed to its perceived ability to retain psychic imprints. It was believed that objects absorbed the energy and memories of those who interacted with them, making older pieces particularly potent for spiritual communication. A chair that had seen countless family gatherings might just hold the echoes of their conversations. The meticulous craftsmanship and attention to detail in Victorian furniture also served to create a sense of solidity and permanence. This robustness made any perceived movement or manipulation by spirits all the more impressive, as it defied the very nature of the object. It was a testament to the power of the unseen, a grand display of supernatural strength against tangible resistance. The furniture also played a role in guiding the participants' focus. A table, for example, would draw everyone's attention to its center, where manifestations were expected to occur. A spirit cabinet would direct gazes to its dark interior, anticipating a grand reveal. The furniture served as a directional beacon for the eyes and minds of the séance attendees. It was like a very large, very heavy arrow pointing to where the ghost should appear. The rich textures of the upholstery, velvet, brocade, damask, added another layer of sensory experience to the séance. The feel of the fabric against the skin, the visual richness of the patterns, all contributed to an immersive environment that could make the unseen feel more real. It created a cocoon of sensory input, fostering a state of deep concentration. This ghost feels quite luxurious, you might think, rubbing the velvet armrest. Finally, the furniture of the 19th century, with its inherent sense of tradition and continuity, offered a powerful counterpoint to the anxieties of a rapidly modernizing world. In an era of scientific upheaval and social change, the solid, familiar presence of cherished furnishings provided a psychological anchor, a link to a seemingly more stable past, even as people reached for contact with an uncertain future. It was a steady hand in a world that felt increasingly unmoored. The low hum of the gaslight continues its steady rhythm, a comforting counterpoint to the profound stillness that fills the room. You find your gaze drawn to the intricate pattern of a large, framed tapestry hanging on the wall, its faded colors depicting a classical scene. This rich visual texture, typical of Victorian interiors, created a sense of depth and complexity, providing a backdrop that could subtly disorient the rational mind and open it to the possibility of the extraordinary. It was like stepping into a dream, where the familiar could suddenly become wonderfully strange. One mainstream historical fact is the profound impact of the American Civil War, 1861–1865, and other conflicts on the spiritualist movement. The massive loss of life created an unprecedented wave of grief and a desperate desire for contact with the fallen. Spiritualism offered a lifeline of hope and comfort to millions of bereaved individuals, providing a perceived means to communicate with their loved ones. The home, with its familiar furniture, became the natural setting for these emotionally charged encounters, turning parlors into temporary sanctuaries of remembrance. A quirky or fringe tidbit from the era is the belief in spirit photography, where not only ghostly figures, but sometimes even spirit vortices or auras were believed to manifest in photographs, often appearing around or emanating from the sitters and the furniture. These unexplained visual anomalies, later often attributed to photographic defects or deliberate manipulation, were taken by some as further evidence of the furniture's energetic properties or its role as a conduit for spiritual forces. Imagine a ghostly glow around your favorite armchair. Quite the conversation starter. Historians still debate the ethical implications of spiritualism, particularly concerning the exploitation of grieving individuals by fraudulent mediums. While many spiritualists were sincere, the potential for manipulation was immense. The theatricality of the seances, enhanced by the elaborate furniture and dim lighting, contributed to this potential for deception, as it created an environment where belief was easily fostered and critical thinking often suspended. Was the furniture an unwitting accomplice, or was it part of a meticulously planned illusion? You notice a small, elegant display cabinet, its glass doors revealing a collection of delicate china and silver trinkets. Such items, often heirlooms or gifts, were imbued with sentimental value, making them potential focal points for spiritual contact. The act of displaying them in a prominent piece of furniture further emphasized their importance, both to the family and perhaps to the lingering spirits. It was like giving the ghosts a gallery of their own memories to browse. The very durability and solid construction of Victorian furniture spoke volumes about the values of the age: stability, permanence, and enduring quality. In a world undergoing rapid industrialization and social change, these pieces provided a comforting sense of continuity and tradition. When spiritual phenomena, such as table tipping or rappings, occurred on such robust furniture, it only served to amplify the perceived power and authenticity of the spiritual intervention. It's much more impressive when a solid oak table moves than a flimsy card table. The prevalence of dark, heavy furniture with its rich, deep colors and often intricate carvings also contributed to the aesthetic of the sublime. This concept, popular in the Romantic and Gothic movements, evoked a sense of awe, grandeur, and sometimes terror in the face of immense power, whether natural or supernatural. The furniture itself became part of this sublime experience, a silent, imposing witness to the mysteries of the universe. It was furniture that dared you to question its solidity. One interesting aspect is how the furniture often provided physical points of contact for both the living and the dead. Participants would place their hands on the table, while spirits were believed to use the table for rappings or levitations. This shared physical space, mediated by the furniture, reinforced the idea of a tangible connection between the two realms. It was a very literal way of bridging the divide. The strategic placement of furniture within the parlor also created natural pathways and focal points for the seance. A central table, surrounded by chairs, directed Ryan's attention inwards. A cabinet against a wall provided a clear stage for materializations. The furniture was not randomly arranged. It was consciously or unconsciously designed to facilitate the spiritual experience. It was furniture with a clear mission. You feel a subtle vibration, a faint tremor that might be the house settling, or something far more otherworldly. The sensory details of the room, the feel of the cool, polished wood, the soft texture of the upholstery, the faint scent of old dust and beeswax, all contributed to an immersive environment. This heightened sensory experience could lead to a state of heightened suggestibility, making the perception of spiritual phenomena more vivid and convincing. It was an environment designed to engage all the senses, even those you didn't know you had. The furniture, with its inherent sense of history and countless silent observations, often became anthropomorphized in the minds of spiritualists. It was as if the very objects themselves were sentient witnesses, holding the echoes of past events and the lingering presence of former occupants. This lent a deeper, more personal dimension to the spiritual encounters. If that old grandfather clock could talk, oh, the tales it would tell, you might whisper to yourself. The very act of dressing the room, filling it with luxurious and meaningful furniture, reflected a Victorian desire to create a sacred, or at least highly respected space for their spiritual pursuits. It elevated the seance from a casual curiosity to a serious undertaking, worthy of a grand setting. It was a sign of respect for the spirits and for the seriousness of the endeavor. Finally, the decorative richness of the furniture, often adorned with symbolic motifs and intricate carvings, provided a visual language that subtly reinforced the themes of mortality, remembrance, and the afterlife. These silent cues prepared the mind for the profound nature of the spiritual contact, making the furniture not just functional objects, but symbolic vessels of meaning. The air in the parlor feels thick with the passage of time, an almost palpable presence. Your eyes are drawn to the elaborate, often heavy, window treatments, the velvet drapes pulled tightly to exclude the outside world. This deliberate exclusion of external distractions served to create a self-contained environment, an isolated space where the boundaries of reality could be more easily stretched. The furniture, a fixed and solid presence within this sealed chamber, became the tangible anchors in a world where the unseen was invited to intrude. One quirky or fringe tidbit from the period relates to the use of magnetic passes by mediums. These were specific hand gestures or motions made over the participants or even over the furniture, believed to draw out or channel the magnetic fluid necessary for spiritual communication. The solid furniture provided the perfect surface for these passes, grounding the seemingly ethereal energy in a physical object. It was like trying to charge your furniture with spirit electricity. Just a few more passes, and this armchair will be perfectly charged for a poltergeist. The concept of sympathetic magic also played a subtle role, where an object closely associated with a person was believed to retain a connection to their spirit. This made personal effects and furniture particularly potent in seances. A deceased loved one's favorite chair, their writing desk, or even a particular piece of decor they admired could become a powerful conduit for their lingering presence. The furniture wasn't just a prop, it was a relic, a memory made tangible. Historians still debate the genuine psychological effects of participation in seances. Did the immersive environment, combined with the power of collective belief and perhaps clever manipulation, lead to genuine altered states of consciousness or simply heightened suggestibility? The fancy furniture, with its ability to both comfort and impress, certainly played a part in creating this highly charged psychological space. It was a theater of the mind, with opulent furnishings. You feel the slight coolness of the air, a whisper that might be the drafts of an old house or something more. Your gaze falls on a large, intricately framed mirror, its dark glass reflecting the dim room. Mirrors were often seen as portals, as objects that could capture lingering images or even allow spirits to manifest. The ornate frames themselves, often dark and imposing, added to this mystique, framing the potential gateway to another dimension. You half expect a fleeting image to appear behind your own reflection. The sheer mass and dark tones of Victorian furniture contributed to a sense of gravitas and solemnity, which was perfectly suited to the serious business of communing with the dead. This was not a light-hearted affair. It was an attempt to transcend the ultimate boundary. The furniture, with its inherent wag, and somber aesthetic, underscored the profound nature of the endeavor. It was furniture that understood the gravity of death and dressed accordingly. One mainstream historical fact is the significant role of the mourning industry in the Victorian era. Elaborate clothing, jewelry, and even specific mourning furniture were produced to cater to the intense public grief after a death. This cultural emphasis on remembrance and continued connection with the deceased created fertile ground for spiritualism. The furniture within the home, already imbued with memories of the departed, became a natural extension of these mourning rituals. The use of specific fabrics like velvet, brocade, and damask for upholstery was not just about luxury. These materials also absorbed sound, creating a hushed and intimate acoustic environment. This quietness was crucial for discerning subtle raps, whispers, or other purported spirit manifestations, making the environment conducive to hearing the faintest sounds from the other side. It was like having built-in noise cancellation for your ghostly conversations. The deliberate arrangement of furniture, often in a circular or semicircular formation around a central table, was a key element of seance protocol. This arrangement fostered a sense of communal energy and focus, directing attention to the area where phenomena were expected to occur. The furniture essentially dictated the choreography of the seance, guiding participants into their roles. You notice the elaborate carvings on the legs of a console table, depicting mythical creatures or symbolic motifs. These details, often drawn from ancient folklore or Gothic art, added to the mystical ambience of the room, subtly inviting the mind to consider worlds beyond the mundane. They were like silent guardians of the threshold, hinting at the strange possibilities within. The durability of Victorian furniture, built to last for generations, meant that pieces would accumulate a long history within a family. This longevity made them ideal candidates for retaining psychic impressions or becoming haunted by the spirits of those who had lived and died around them. The furniture was not just old, it was experienced, a veteran of countless lives. The furniture also acted as a very tangible anchor in an experience that was often designed to be disorienting. When lights were low and strange sounds or movements occurred, the solidity of the table, the firmness of the chair, provided something real to hold onto, a grounding presence in an otherwise ambiguous reality. It was a physical tether to the material world. Finally, the desire for status and respectability in Victorian society meant that even in the pursuit of the supernatural, appearances mattered. Fancy furniture in the parlor lent an air of seriousness and legitimacy to the spiritualist gatherings, transforming them from mere parlor games into dignified inquiries into the nature of existence. It was furniture that announced, "We're very serious about talking to ghosts here." The air in the parlor feels dense, almost palpable, with the weight of unseen presences. Your gaze is drawn to the elaborate gaslight fixtures, their delicate glass shades diffusing the light in a soft, wavering glow. This dim, flickering illumination was not just a practical necessity. It was a deliberate choice to create an atmosphere of mystery and ambiguity, perfect for obscuring details and allowing the imagination to fill in the gaps. The fancy furniture, with its dark, reflective surfaces, caught and amplified this light, creating dancing shadows that seemed to hint at unseen movements. One mainstream historical fact that influenced the spiritualist movement was the rapid advancement of science and technology in the 19th century. Inventions like the telegraph and photography, which allowed for seemingly instantaneous communication and the capture of fleeting images, pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. This climate of scientific wonder made the claims of spiritualism, such as communication with the dead or physical manifestations, seem less far-fetched to a public accustomed to marvels. The furniture, as a product of this industrial age's craftsmanship, subtly underscored this connection to progress, even when used for ancient beliefs. A quirky or fringe tidbit from the era concerns the belief that certain spirit guides or entities had preferred ways of interacting with the physical world, sometimes even developing preferences for certain types of furniture. Some guides might favor wrappings on a heavy oak table, while others might prefer to manipulate lighter objects on a delicate side table. This personal preference added a layer of personality to the unseen forces, making the interaction feel more intimate and customized. Imagine a ghost saying, "Oh, not that old thing, darling. I only communicate through polished mahogany." Historians still debate the role of collecti v. hallucination or shared psychological experiences in seances. Did the intense focus, the dim lighting, the suggestive atmosphere, and the social pressure combine to create an environment where participants genuinely perceived phenomena that were not objectively present? The furniture, as a constant, tangible element in this immersive experience, might have served to anchor these perceptions, lending them a sense of reality. It was a group theatrical performance, and the furniture was the silent co-star. You notice the elaborate cornices and ceiling rosettes, their intricate plasterwork softened by the dim light. These architectural details, often overlooked, contributed to the overall sense of grandeur and formality in the Victorian parlor. This elevated setting lent a certain dignity to the spiritualist endeavors, suggesting that such profound communications were only fitting for such a serious and beautiful space. It was like hosting a very important dignitary, only the dignitary was from the afterlife. The sheer solidity and robust construction of much of the 19th century furniture were essential for the more physical manifestations of spiritualism, such as table tipping or levitation. A flimsy table would simply collapse or be dismissed as a trick. The impressive resistance of heavy furniture to alleged spiritual forces made the phenomena appear far more compelling and miraculous, lending an air of authenticity to the medium's claims. It was furniture built to withstand a spectral wrestling match. The prevalence of cabinets of curiosities, or wonder rooms, in Victorian homes also influenced the spiritualist aesthetic. These cabinets, filled with a diverse array of natural and artificial objects, reflected a desire to categorize and understand the world, both seen and unseen. When seances were held in rooms containing such collections, the effect was compounded, as if the room itself was a microcosm of all mysteries, including the spiritual. Perhaps a ghost would tidy your curios, just to be helpful. One interesting aspect is how the furniture, particularly chairs and sofas, offered a sense of security and containment for the participants. In a potentially unsettling encounter with the unknown, the ability to sink into a plush, comfortable seat provided a physical anchor, a feeling of being protected within the confines of the familiar home. It was a psychological embrace from your decor. The rich textures of the upholstery, from the soft velvet to the coarse brocade, provided a tactile experience that further immersed participants in the seance environment. The feel of the fabric against the skin, combined with the visual richness of the patterns, created a sensory cocoon that could enhance suggestibility and focus, making it easier to perceive subtle phenomena. It was furniture that felt as good as it looked, even to the spirits. The very arrangement of the furniture, often creating intimate conversational groupings around a central table, encouraged close proximity and shared focus among participants. This physical closeness was believed to amplify the collective energy and make spiritual contact more likely. The furniture thus served not just as objects, but as a framework for the human interaction central to the seance. It literally brought people closer to the unknown. You feel a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, a subtle vibration that might be the house settling, or something far more unusual. The furniture, with its deep roots in the floorboards and its inherent stability, would transmit these vibrations, making any perceived movement or sound all the more convincing. It acted as an amplifier for subtle energetic shifts. The symbolism embedded in the furniture's decorative elements, the carved lions, the draped figures, the floral motifs, often resonated with Victorian themes of mortality, resurrection, and the enduring power of memory. While not explicitly spiritualist, these motifs created a subconscious visual language that prepared the mind for the profound nature of communicating with the dead. The furniture itself seemed to speak of deeper truths. Finally, the furniture of the 19th century, often handcrafted and passed down through generations, carried with it a powerful sense of history and familial memory. This inherent story within each piece made it a natural conduit for spiritualists seeking to connect with ancestors or loved ones who had once lived and breathed in their presence. The furniture wasn't just decorative. It was a living archive of the past, waiting to be unlocked by the unseen. The silence in the parlor feels almost alive, a dense fabric woven with expectation. Your eyes linger on a particularly ornate credenza, its surface a tableau of framed photographs and delicate porcelain. This accumulation of objects, each with its own story and sentimental value, created a visual narrative of lives lived, a poignant reminder of the human connections that spiritua lists desperately sought to rekindle. The furniture wasn't just a container, it was a stage for the drama of remembrance. One quirky or fringe tidbit from the era involved the materialization of hands or faces from a spirit cabinet, sometimes even appearing to interact with the furniture. Reports claimed that these spectral appendages would tap on the table, grasp a medium's hand, or even attempt to move objects. The solid, tangible presence of the furniture provided a stark contrast to the ephemeral nature of these manifestations, making them seem all the more real and astonishing. Imagine a ghostly hand reaching out to adjust a teacup on the credenza. Now that's service. The Victorian era was marked by a fascination with scientific discovery and progress, but also a lingering belief in the mystical and the unseen. Spiritualism offered a bridge between these two worlds, attempting to apply scientific methodologies to supernatural phenomena. The precise, well-crafted furniture, a product of human ingenuity and mechanical advances, provided a tangible, scientific backdrop for these explorations, subtly lending credibility to the extraordinary claims. It was like performing a magic trick in a laboratory. Historians still debate the role of socioeconomic factors in the rise of spiritualism. Did it appeal more to certain classes, or was it a truly egalitarian movement? While fancy furniture was certainly a sign of wealth, the democratization of production meant that more modest, yet still substantial, pieces were available to the middle class. This allowed for a broader participation in seances, demonstrating that the desire for spiritual connection transcended economic boundaries, even if the grandest furnishings were reserved for the elite. You notice the heavy, fringed throws draped over armchairs and sofas, their patterns rich and elaborate. These textiles added layers of texture and visual warmth to the room, but also served a more practical purpose. They could muffle sound, further contributing to the hushed atmosphere of a seance. In a low-lit room, these drapes and throws could also conceal subtle movements or even provide temporary hiding places for props or confederates. It was a clever use of soft furnishings for hardcore spectral pursuits. The sheer solidity and permanence of Victorian furniture contrasted sharply with the fleeting and intangible nature of spiritual manifestations. This contrast was often emphasized by mediums and believers to highlight the miraculous nature of the phenomena. When a heavy table moved seemingly of its own accord, the very immobility of the object served to amplify the sense of wonder and awe. It was furniture that defied its own nature, all for the sake of a good ghost story. One mainstream historical fact is the devastating impact of infectious diseases and high child mortality rates throughout the 19th century. Families experienced profound and repeated losses, leading to widespread grief. Spiritualism offered a powerful coping mechanism, providing hope for continued connection with deceased loved ones. The home, filled with familiar furniture, became a sanctuary for this grief and longing, turning ordinary objects into sacred conduits of memory and communication. The ornate carvings and decorative flourishes on the furniture often drew inspiration from Gothic and classical art, which frequently incorporated themes of death, mythology, and the afterlife. These visual cues subtly prepared the mind for engagement with the unknown, creating a subliminal connection between the tangible world of the parlor and the ethereal realm of spirits. The furniture itself seemed to whisper tales of ancient mysteries. The deliberate dimming of the gaslight or the use of candles was a common practice in seances. This low light created an environment where shadows danced and details blurred, making it easier for participants to perceive ambiguous phenomena as spiritual manifestations. The dark, reflective surfaces of the furniture enhanced this effect, creating a shifting, elusive visual landscape that encouraged belief. It was lighting designed for ghosts, and furniture that knew how to work its angles. The social ritual of the seance often involved participants holding hands around a table, fostering a sense of shared purpose and collective energy. The table itself became the central nexus of this energy, a physical focal point for the group's intentions. The choice of a sturdy, well-made table was paramount, as it needed to withstand the energetic demands of the seance and provide a reliable surface for wrappings and other physical manifestations. You feel a subtle vibration in the air, a ripple that might just be your imagination or something far more intriguing. The furniture, firmly rooted in the physical space, acted as a kind of amplifier for these subtle energetic shifts. Any faint tremor, any slight creak, could be interpreted as a sign from the other making the furniture an active participant in the communication. The furniture also provided a sense of groundedness and security in a situation that could otherwise be quite unsettling. When the boundaries of reality seemed to blur, and the unseen intruded upon the physical world, The solid presence of a familiar armchair or a sturdy table offered a tangible anchor, a reminder of the material world. It was a comforting presence, even when the spirits were being rambunctious. Finally, the decorative richness and meticulous craftsmanship of Victorian furniture reflected a culture that valued intricate detail and profound symbolism. This artistic sensibility extended to the spiritualist movement, where every object, including the furniture, could be imbued with deeper meaning and purpose, transforming ordinary household items into instruments of otherworldly contact. It was furniture that understood its role in the grand spiritual drama. The air in the parlor feels charged, a subtle tension that seems to hum just beneath the surface of the quiet. You notice the deep luster of the polished wood, the way it catches the faint gaslight and throws back muted reflections, creating an illusion of depth and movement. This interplay of light and shadow, expertly utilized in seance settings, made the solid furniture seem to possess an almost fluid quality, subtly blurring the lines between the tangible and the ethereal. It was a visual trick that made the unseen feel closer. One mainstream historical fact about the 19th century is the increasing prevalence of scientific materialism, a worldview that sought to explain all phenomena through natural laws and physical processes. In response to this, spiritualism offered a counter-narrative, asserting the existence of a non-physical realm and the persistence of consciousness after death. The seemingly miraculous movements of furniture, defying known physical laws, served as powerful evidence for spiritualists against the rising tide of scientific skepticism. It was a battle of worldviews, fought on the polished surface of a Victorian table. A quirky or fringe tidbit from the era concerns the belief in apportation, where objects were allegedly materialized from thin air or transported from one place to another by spirits. Sometimes, small items of furniture or objects from within a display cabinet would be said to have been apportated. The solid presence of the furniture provided a tangible reference point for these mysterious disappearances and reappearances, making the phenomenon all the more astonishing. Imagine your favorite figurine suddenly appearing inside a locked cabinet. Quite the ghostly magic trick. Historians still debate the sincerity of many Victorian spiritualists. Were they truly convinced of their ability to contact the dead, or were they primarily seeking attention, financial gain, or a sense of power in a society that often limited their roles? The elaborate furniture and theatrical settings certainly enhanced the spectacle, regardless of the medium's true motivations, creating an immersive experience that encouraged belief, both in the audience and perhaps even in the performers themselves. It was a grand performance, whether divine or deceptive. You shift in your seat, the soft velvet giving way slightly beneath you. Your eyes are drawn to a decorative screen, perhaps made of intricate wood carving or embroidered panels. These screens were frequently used in seances to create a spirit cabinet, a darkened enclosure where mediums would supposedly enter a trance and allow spirits to manifest. The solid furniture provided the necessary structure for these enclosed spaces, giving form to the unseen processes unfolding within. It was a very fashionable box for housing your temporary ghost. The sheer mass and dark tones of Victorian furniture contributed to an atmosphere of solemnity and seriousness, aligning perfectly with the gravity of communicating with the deceased. This aesthetic helped to convey that the seance was not a trivial amusement, but a profound and often emotionally charged endeavor. The furniture wasn't just decorative, it was a visual statement of purpose. It conveyed a respectful silence, even if the spirits did not. The concept of a haunted object was deeply embedded in Victorian folklore, and furniture, being so intimately connected with domestic life and personal history, was a prime candidate. A cradle that rocked on its own, a chair where a beloved family member always sat, a bureau containing hidden letters. These objects became imbued with the lingering presence of the past, making them powerful focal points for spiritual activity. The furniture literally held the ghosts of memories. One interesting aspect is how the furniture often provided physical points of contact for both the living and the dead. Participants would place their hands on the table, creating a circle of energy, while spirits were believed to use the table for wrappings, tilts, or even levitations. This shared physical space, mediated by the solid furniture, reinforced the idea of a tangible connection between the two realms. It was a very literal handshake across the veil. The deliberate arrangement of furniture in a circular or semicircular fashion around a central table was a key element of seance protocol. This arrangement fostered a sense of communal energy and focus, directing everyone's attention to the area where phenomena were expected to occur. The furniture thus served as a silent choreographer, guiding the participants into their roles and optimizing the conditions for spiritual contact. You feel a subtle, almost imperceptible air current, a whisper that might be a draft from an ill-fitting window, or something far more intriguing. The furniture, with its numerous nooks, crannies, and heavy drapes, created a labyrinthine environment of microclimates and subtle movements, providing ample opportunity for the imagination to interpret these nuances as spectral activity. It was a subtle, constantly shifting stage for the unseen. The craftsmanship of Victorian furniture, with its emphasis on intricate carving, fine joinery, and durable materials, created a sense of enduring quality and authenticity. This perceived integrity of the furniture subtly extended to the spiritual phenomena it facilitated. If the table was so well made and solid, then surely the astonishing things happening around it must also be genuine. It was furniture that vouched for the ghosts. The social function of the parlor, as the primary space for entertaining and displaying refinement, meant that the furniture had to be both functional for seances and aesthetically pleasing for general social engagements. This dual role meant the furniture had to be versatile, capable of hosting both tea parties and otherworldly visitations with equal grace. It was furniture that knew how to switch roles seamlessly. Finally, the decorative richness of the furniture, often adorned with symbolic motifs from classical mythology, medieval lore, or allegorical scenes, provided a visual language that subtly reinforced the themes of mortality, destiny, and the enduring nature of the soul. These visual cues prepared the mind for the profound nature of the spiritual contact, making the furniture not just functional objects, but symbolic vessels of deeper meaning. The stillness in the parlor is so profound you can almost hear your own heartbeat. Your gaze is drawn to a towering, dark wood armoire, its polished surface reflecting the faint gaslight like a silent, brooding sentinel. These imposing pieces, often filled with forgotten linens or personal effects, became focal points in seances, their enclosed spaces perfect for concealing a medium or for the mysterious manifestation of objects. The furniture itself seemed to hold its breath, a silent witness to the whispered secrets and unseen movements that permeated the room. One mainstream historical fact that influenced the widespread acceptance of spiritualism was the ongoing medical revolution. Despite advancements, many diseases remained incurable, and death was a constant, often unpredictable presence. Spiritualism offered a form of emotional solace and a sense of control over the uncontrollable, providing a perceived means to communicate with loved ones lost to illness. The home, with its familiar and comforting furniture, became the sanctuary where this solace was sought, turning ordinary objects into symbols of enduring connection. A quirky or fringe tidbit from the era relates to the use of wrapping hands, wooden or rubber hands, sometimes attached to a mechanism, that mediums would use to create tapping sounds, often on the furniture. These were meant to simulate the sounds of spirits communicating through knocks. The solid surfaces of tables and cabinets provided the perfect resonant surface for these sounds, making them appear to emanate from the furniture itself, further enhancing the illusion of spiritual contact. Imagine a ghostly high five on your dining table. Historians still debate the impact of technology on the spiritualist movement. While new inventions like the telegraph and photography seemed to open doors to unseen communication, they also provided new tools for debunkers to expose fraud. The very furniture that facilitated spiritual phenomena could also be meticulously examined for hidden mechanisms, making it a battleground between belief and skepticism. Was the furniture a tool of the spirits, or merely a cleverly designed prop? You feel a subtle chill in the air, a fleeting sensation that might be a draft or something more ethereal. Your eyes scan the shadows that cling to the ornate carvings on a side table. These intricate details, often depicting natural forms or allegorical figures, contributed to the visual richness of the Victorian parlor, creating an environment that was both stimulating and subtle. Lie disorienting. They provided visual noise that could distract the rational mind and make it more receptive to subconscious suggestion. It was like a very detailed canvas for your mind to paint ghosts upon. The sheer solidity and craftsmanship of Victorian furniture, often handcrafted from heavy woods like oak and mahogany, contrasted sharply with the intangible nature of the spirits being invoked. This contrast made any perceived movement or manipulation of the furniture by unseen forces all the more impressive and convincing. It was a tangible testament to the power of the unseen, a dramatic display of spiritual strength against material resistance. The prevalence of dark, rich colors in Victorian furniture and decor, deep reds, forest greens, brooding browns, created an atmosphere of seriousness and introspection. This somber aesthetic was perfectly suited to the solemn nature of seances, which often involved grief, remembrance, and the profound contemplation of mortality. The furniture set the mood, a silent, weighty presence in the face of the unknown. It was furniture that wore its gravitas on its sleeve. One interesting aspect is how the furniture, particularly the table, became the central focus of the seance. Participants would gather around it, their hands often linked, creating a physical and energetic circuit. The table itself was not just a surface, it was the nexus of the encounter, the point of contact between worlds. Its solid presence provided a grounding point for the intense energies believed to be at play. The social rituals surrounding a seance were often quite formal, reflecting the broader Victorian emphasis on decorum and proper conduct. The presence of elaborate furniture reinforced this formality, elevating the seance from a casual curiosity to a dignified inquiry. It was an event, and the furniture was dressed for the occasion, adding a sense of weight and seriousness to the proceedings. You imagine the countless stories held within the very fibers of the wood, the unseen memories etched into the upholstery. The furniture, having witnessed generations of family life, births, deaths, and countless conversations, became a silent repository of human experience. This accumulated history made it, in the minds of spiritualists, more likely to retain psychic imprints and thus more receptive to spiritual contact. It was furniture that had seen it all and perhaps could tell it all. The strategic placement of furniture within the parlor also created zones of intimacy and focus. A grouping of chairs around a fireplace, a central table for a séance, a secluded corner for private contemplation. Each arrangement served a specific purpose, contributing to the overall flow and functionality of the spiritual experience. The furniture wasn't just placed, it was choreographed. The use of highly polished surfaces on wood and metal, common in Victorian furniture, also played a subtle role. These reflective surfaces caught the flickering gaslight, creating dynamic patterns of light and shadow that could easily be interpreted as fleeting apparitions or subtle spirit movements. The ambiguity of these reflections added to the mystique, allowing for both rational and supernatural interpretations. Is that a ghost, or just the reflection of my own tired face? You might wonder. Finally, the enduring quality and timeless design of much of the 19th century furniture offered a sense of continuity and stability in a rapidly changing world. In an era of industrial upheaval and scientific discovery that challenged traditional beliefs, the solid, familiar presence of cherished furnishings provided a psychological anchor, a link to a seemingly more stable past, even as people reached for contact with an uncertain future. It was furniture that promised to be there, even if the world around it was shifting. The air in the parlor feels as still as a painting, every object perfectly placed, yet alive with unseen potential. Your gaze falls on a small, delicately carved side table, its surface holding a single, unlit candle in an ornate holder. Even such a minor piece contributes to the overall theatricality of the room, suggesting hidden rituals and a quiet reverence for the unknown. The furniture, in its very stillness, seemed to anticipate the disruption of the ordinary by the extraordinary. One quirky or fringe tidbit from the era involved the use of spirit bells, small bells that were supposedly rung by unseen hands during seances. These bells would often be placed on tables or other pieces of furniture, providing a tangible surface from which the ethereal sounds could emanate. The solid furniture provided the necessary contrast to the seemingly unsupported ringing, making the phenomena all the more astonishing and difficult to explain. Imagine a ghost playing a silent symphony on your mantelpiece bells. The concept of auras, or energetic fields around individuals and objects, was gaining traction. In the 19th century, influencing spiritualist beliefs, it was thought that certain pieces of furniture, particularly those with a long history or strong emotional associations, could retain or even emanate a powerful aura that attracted spirits. This made antique or inherited furniture particularly prized for seance work, as it was considered to be charged with residual energy. Your gray dance rocking chair might just be a spiritual hotspot. Historians still debate the role of showmanship and performance in the success of mediums. Were the dramatic flourishes, the dim lighting, the elaborate furniture, and the carefully constructed atmosphere merely a form of entertainment? Or did they genuinely enhance the medium's ability to connect with the spiritual realm? The lines between genuine spiritual experience and captivating theater were often blurred, and the furniture played a crucial role in both aspects. It was a stage for both the sacred and the sensational. You notice the heavy, ornate fireplace, its polished brass fender gleaming faintly. Even though no fire burns, the hearth was traditionally the heart of the home, a place of warmth, gathering, and often storytelling. In a seance, the fireplace could become a symbolic portal, a place where spirits might manifest or through which messages could pass. The solid, unmoving presence of the fireplace itself, framed by grand furniture, anchored this potent symbolism. Perhaps the ghost of Uncle Barnaby will pop out of the chimney, you muse, a slight shiver running down your spine. The sheer visual density of Victorian parlors, filled with furniture, art, and decorative objects, created a rich tapestry that could both comfort and subtly overwhelm the senses. This sensory immersion could induce a state of heightened suggestibility, making the mind more open to perceiving subtle phenomena and interpreting them as spiritual manifestations. It was a deliberate embrace of sensory input, designed to bypass rational thought. One mainstream historical fact is the significant role of photography in documenting, and sometimes fabricating, spiritual phenomena. Spirit photographs, often showing ethereal figures hovering around sitters or furniture, gained immense popularity. The tangible, recognizable furniture in these images provided a crucial element of realism, making the ghostly additions seem more convincing against a familiar backdrop. It was like giving ghosts a material stage to perform upon. The use of specific types of wood for furniture, particularly dark and dense varieties like mahogany and walnut, was not just about aesthetic preference. It also contributed to the solidity and durability needed for seance work. These woods were less prone to warping or splintering under stress, making them ideal for tables that might be subjected to rappings, tilts, or alleged levitations. The integrity of the wood mirrored the desired integrity of the spiritual experience. The social ritual of the seance often involved participants gathering closely around a table, their hands linked, to create a collective energetic circle. The furniture, specifically the table and surrounding chairs, provided the physical structure for this ritual, fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose among the attendees. It was a very literal way of connecting, both with each other and hopefully with the beyond. You feel a profound sense of the past within the room, as if the very air remembers conversations and emotions. The furniture, having silently witnessed generations of human life, was believed by spiritualists to retain the psychic imprints of those experiences. This made old, cherished pieces particularly valuable for seance work, as they were thought to be saturated with the energies of the departed. It was furniture that had absorbed decades of gossip and spectral whispers. The deliberate dimming of the gaslight, or the use of candles, was a common practice during seances to create a mysterious and ambiguous atmosphere. In this low light, the heavy, dark furniture cast deep, shifting shadows, making it easier for subtle movements or visual anomalies to be interpreted as ghostly presences. The furniture became a canvas for the unseen, a silent accomplice in the play of light and shadow. The ornate details and intricate carvings on the furniture often held symbolic meanings, drawing from mythology, folklore, or allegorical themes related to life, death, and the afterlife. These subtle visual cues contributed to the overall mystical ambience of the room, preparing the minds of the participants for the profound nature of the spiritual contact they sought. The furniture itself seemed to speak a secret language. Finally, the inherent sense of permanence and tradition conveyed by Victorian furniture offered a comforting stability in a world that was undergoing rapid and often disorienting change. In an era of scientific upheaval and shifting social norms, the solid, familiar, our presence of cherished furnishings provided a psychological anchor, a link to a seemingly more stable past, even as people reached for contact with an uncertain future. It was furniture that stood firm, even when the world around it was turning upside down. The deep silence of the parlor has settled around you now, a profound quiet that seems to hold the very essence of the past. You feel a lingering coolness in the air, a whisper that might be the house settling, or perhaps the echo of a forgotten presence. Your eyes rest upon a large, ornate cabinet, its dark wood gleaming, its glass panes reflecting the dim light like silent, watchful eyes. This piece, like so much of the furniture around you, feels imbued with a history, a quiet sentinel to countless secrets and unspoken desires. One mainstream historical fact that greatly fueled the spiritualist movement was the sheer density of death in Victorian society. Epidemics, poor sanitation, and high infant mortality rates meant that nearly every family experienced profound loss. Spiritualism offered a desperately needed form of comfort and hope, a perceived way to maintain bonds with those who had passed on. The furniture, as a constant, familiar presence in the home, became a tangible link to these lost loved ones, often used as a focal point for communication. It was furniture that knew grief intimately. A quirky or fringe tidbit from the era concerns the belief in psychic imprints on objects. It was thought that strong emotions or significant events could leave an energetic residue on furniture and other personal belongings. This made inherited furniture particularly potent for seances, as it was believed to retain the psychic energy of former occupants, making it easier for their spirits to communicate. Imagine your antique desk whispering tales of its former owners, complete with dramatic sighs. Historians still debate the extent to which spiritualism was a form of proto-psychotherapy for Victorian society. Did the rituals of the seance, the shared experience, and the belief in spiritual contact provide a release for trauma, grief, and societal anxieties? The comforting and familiar environment of the well-furnished parlor, combined with the solemnity of the proceedings, certainly created a space conducive to emotional processing, regardless of the objective reality of the spirits. It was therapy, disguised as a ghostly gathering. You notice the heavy velvet drapes, drawn tight, shutting out the mundane world. This deliberate act of enclosure created an almost sacred space, an insulated environment where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual realms could be more easily blurred. The furniture, a fixed and unmoving presence within this contained world, became the anchor in a reality where the unseen was invited to intrude. It was a cozy, well-appointed little universe for talking to the dead. The sheer weight and robust construction of Victorian furniture were crucial for the theatricality and perceived authenticity of spiritual phenomena. When a heavy table tilted, or a solid cabinet door mysteriously opened, the impressive resistance of the object to alleged spiritual forces made the manifestation seem far more miraculous. It was a testament to the power of the unseen, a dramatic demonstration of supernatural strength against tangible resistance. The dark, rich hues of the wood, mahogany, walnut, ebony, contributed to the somber and mysterious atmosphere of the Victorian parlor. This aesthetic was perfectly suited to the serious and often melancholic nature of seances, reinforcing the gravity of communicating with the deceased. The furniture itself seemed to wear a look of profound contemplation, a silent witness to the depths of human emotion. It was furniture that understood the mood of the moment. One interesting aspect is how the furniture often became anthropomorphized in ghost stories and popular culture. A rocking chair that rocked on its own, a piano that played eerie melodies, a mirror that showed phantom reflections. These pieces of furniture were not just inanimate objects. They became characters in the haunting, imbued with their own histories and spectral agency. They were the silent, yet powerful members of the ghostly ensemble. The deliberate arrangement of furniture, often in a circular formation around a central table, was a key element of seance protocol. This arrangement fostered a sense of communal energy and focus, directing everyone's attention to the area where phenomena were expected to occur. The furniture thus served as a silent choreographer, guiding the participants into their roles and optimizing the conditions for spiritual contact. It was furniture that knew its cues. You feel a subtle vibration in the air, a fleeting tremor that might be the house settling, or something far more unusual. The furniture, firmly rooted in the physical space, acted as a kind of amplifier for these subtle energetic shifts. Any faint creak, any slight movement could be interpreted as a sign from the other side, making the furniture an active participant in the communication, a sounding board for the unseen. The craftsmanship of Victorian furniture, with its emphasis on intricate carving, fine joinery, and durable materials, created a sense of enduring quality and authenticity. This perceived integrity of the furniture subtly extended to the spiritual phenomena it facilitated. If the table was so well made and solid, then surely the astonishing things happening around it must also be genuine. It was furniture that implicitly vouched for the ghosts. The social function of the parlor, as the primary space for formal entertaining and displays of refinement, meant that the furniture had to be both functional for seances and aesthetically pleasing for general social engagements. This dual role meant the furniture had to be versatile, capable of hosting both tea parties and otherworldly visitations with equal grace. It was truly multi-talented furniture. Finally, the decorative richness of the furniture, often adorned with symbolic motifs from classical mythology, medieval lore, or allegorical scenes, provided a visual language that subtly reinforced the themes of mortality, destiny, and the enduring nature of the soul. These visual cues prepared the mind for the profound nature of the spiritual contact, making the furniture not just functional objects, but symbolic vessels of deeper meaning. It was furniture designed to communicate, even without words. So as the last whispers of our journey through the shadowy parlors of the 19th century fade, you can feel the quiet settling in around you, a gentle hush that invites peaceful rest. The flickering gaslight of our story gives way to the soft glow of your own nightlight, or perhaps the complete darkness of a tranquil room. All those heavy, ornate pieces of furniture, so central to our tale, now seem to recede into the shadows, becoming mere outlines, silent and still. The spirits, if they were ever truly there, have surely found their way back to their own restful places. You are safe, nestled in your own bed, far from the creaking tables and mysterious wrappings of a bygone era. Let the quiet hum of your fan or the gentle rhythm of your own breathing lull you deeper into relaxation. The mysteries of the past can wait for another night. For now, simply drift, letting go of any lingering thoughts or worries. Imagine yourself floating on a calm, dark river, the banks lined with soft, mossy trees, the moon a sliver above. There's nothing to do, nowhere to go, just gentle, drifting peace. Feel your muscles soften, your breath deepen, as you sink effortlessly into sleep. Good night.